Chapter 732. After being kicked into the furnace of heaven and earth, Gohan's body slid down the smooth surface of the furnace. In the end, he returned to the center of the furnace, where the Emperor's blood had fallen and where the broken Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords were. As he slid down the furnace, Gohan's clothes had already turned into a pile of ashes. His yellow skin had also turned into charcoal. Faint yellow pus seeped out from his skin. According to medical terms, Gohan's burns had already covered more than 70% of his body. The temperature of the furnace had risen to 500 degrees Celsius, and it was still rising. Even though Gohan's body had been strengthened by the famed sword Maiden, he could only endure temperatures of around 200 degrees Celsius at most. Even if Gohan was possessed by a deity, he would not be able to last long in temperatures that were over 500 degrees Celsius for a long time. Gohan secretly estimated that he would not be able to last for long. In just 3 or 4 minutes, he would be roasted into a dried corpse by the flames of the furnace. Sword of Spring. At the crucial moment, Gohan pointed the tip of Heavenly Sword at his feet and used the Sword of Spring from the enigmatic 9 swords. The umbrella-shaped barrier had become Gohan's greatest support. It separated Gohan's body from the surface of the furnace of heaven and earth, preventing Gohan's body from coming into direct contact with the furnace. However, this was not a long-term plan. Every second that the Sword of Spring was maintained would consume a large amount of Gohan's sword chi. Gohan currently had 38,621 quarks of sword essences stored in his body. The Sword of Spring would consume 100 quarks of sword essences from Gohan per second. Going by this calculation, Gohan could last for another 386 seconds, which was around 6 to 7 minutes. Even though Gohan was separated from the surface of the furnace of heaven and earth, Gohan still had to endure the temperature of 200 degrees Celsius. The water in Gohan's body was quickly excreted as sweat in an attempt to lower Gohan's body temperature. However, it was like trying to put out a burning cart of firewood with a cup of water. If this went on, Gohan's body would be completely drained of water before the Sword of Spring disappeared. Fortunately, Gohan was not completely helpless. Gohan still had quite a lot of purified water stored in his dimensional pocket. The purified water was originally stored in the dimensional pocket as drinking water. He did not expect it to become Gohan's life-saving water. Gohan directly took out a bucket of purified water and inserted a straw into it. A large amount of cold and sweet purified water entered Gohan's throat through the straw. Then, under the guidance of the sword chi in Gohan's body, it quickly flowed into his various organs that were suffering from dehydration. Gohan even skipped the conversion process of sweat, and directly forced the purified water out of his skin through the sweat glands on the surface of his skin, forming small water droplets. This made Gohan's body look like a lotus leaf covered with dew in the morning. Although these dew droplets would evaporate in less than a second due to the high temperature of over 200 degrees, this successfully stopped Gohan's body temperature from rising any further. Gohan estimated that this bucket of purified water could allow Gohan's body to last for about 3 minutes, and there were still 4 or 5 buckets of purified water in Gohan's dimensional pocket. Therefore, Gohan only had 6 or 7 minutes left. Perhaps it was not even 6 or 7 minutes, because the temperature of the furnace of heaven and earth had already risen to 800 degrees, and the temperature of the air had risen to 300 degrees. If Gohan could not find a way to escape from the furnace of heaven and earth within these 6 or 7 minutes, Gohan would definitely die. It's not like there's no way. Gohan looked up at the sky above him. At this moment, he could faintly see an oval-shaped, transparent lid in the sky. This lid had completely covered the furnace of heaven and earth, and not even a trace of air could escape. If not for this lid, Gohan could have used a sword-controlling technique like the 9 swords of mysterious heaven, engraved swordsman, to control the heavenly sword to fly and escape with Gohan. Unfortunately, this lid was formed by the heavens and earth, and unless the entire furnace of heaven and earth was destroyed, there was no way to penetrate it. From the looks of it, Guhan was completely trapped here. He was trapped in a hopeless situation where he had no chance of survival. Your Majesty shrouding the heavens. Please don't joke around. Hurry up and save me. In this desperate situation, it seemed that Guhan could only beg shrouding the heavens Jendi, who was outside the furnace of heaven and earth, to save him. I never joke around. Shrouding the heavens Jendi's cold voice rang in Guhan's ears. This is your home. You can die here in peace. Why? Guhan seemed to be on the verge of breaking down. He sounded like he was about to cry. Why does His Majesty want to harm me like this? How did I offend His Majesty? I've completed all the tasks His Majesty gave me these past 2 days without a single mistake. I'm here to help His Majesty. Your death will be the greatest help to me. Shrouding the heavens Jendi harumphed coldly, a hint of joy in his voice. I didn't think that the person she had been waiting for 50 years was such an idiot. I have to thank you. If it weren't for you, I might never have been able to activate the furnace of heaven and earth. What do you mean? Isn't the furnace of heaven and earth activated by your sovereign blood? Guhan asked curiously. Looks like you don't have any medical knowledge at all. Let me ask you, how much sovereign blood did I release? Shrouding the heavens Jendi suddenly asked Guhan a strange question. How would I remember such things? Guhan replied in confusion. He didn't seem to understand why Shrouding the heavens Jendi would ask him such a question. Then let me tell you, I released at least 5,500 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood. Shrouding the heavens Jendi's voice was still weak. Let me tell you something common sense. Even if he's a Jendi, a normal-sized human would only have 4,800 cubic centimeters of blood. Even if I drained all the sovereign blood in my body, I wouldn't be able to release 5,500 cubic centimeters. I don't understand. What does this mean? Guhan was still confused. Then let me tell you, this means that the sovereign blood that flowed out wasn't mine alone, but 2 people's. As soon as Shrouding the heavens Jendi spoke, Guhan saw a figure fly in from outside the furnace of heaven and earth, crashing towards him. Guhan hurriedly reached out and caught the person in his arms. When he looked closely, Guhan was given a big fright. Ching-er. What's wrong? Ching-er? The person Guhan caught was none other than Shrouding the heavens Jendi, I Ching. However, this was not the sinister man who had just spoken to Guhan, but the real female I Ching. However, unlike the I Ching that Guhan had seen before, the I Ching in Guhan's arms no longer had the pure and gentle demeanor of a young girl. Instead, she looked like an old woman. Her hair was already white, and her face was full of wrinkles. However, Guhan could feel I Ching's bones through her loose skin. Yes, this was the world 56 years after the Rise of Heroes instance dungeon. I Ching was now 70 years old, and a 70-year-old person should look like this. No, that's not right at all. Guhan mumbled to himself. I Ching is already an empress. She is Jendi. As long as she is willing, she can always maintain her appearance when she thinks she is at her most beautiful. There has never been a female Jendi who was willing to face the world with an old face. If the person in my arms is the real Ching-er, then who are you? And who is Shrouding the heavens Jendi? Guhan asked blankly. I am Shrouding the heavens Jendi. Outside the furnace of heaven and earth, the man's voice was still there. She is also Shrouding the heavens Jendi. Our fates were once intertwined, but now it is time to end it. From now on, there is only one Shrouding the heavens Jendi in this world. You and your Ching-er should go where you belong. In another 50 minutes, the temperature of the furnace of heaven and earth will reach its highest temperature of 108,000 degrees Celsius. Ching-er has waited for you for 50 years, but she did not expect to die with you. I have fulfilled her wish, and I have done a little. Before he could finish listening, Guhan suddenly felt a severe ringing in his ears. Then, Shrouding the heavens Jendi, who was outside the furnace of heaven and earth, did not say another word. Damn it! My body is on the verge of collapsing. The ringing in his ears made Gahan realize that his body could not withstand the high temperature any longer. In the 3 minutes that Gahan and Shrouding the Heavens Jindi talked, the temperature in the furnace of heaven and earth had risen to 1,500 degrees Celsius. This reduced Gahan's original estimate of 6 to 7 minutes to about 4 minutes. 3 minutes had passed, and Gahan only had 1 minute left. Cough, cough, cough. Gahan suddenly coughed, and a stream of water spurted out of his throat. Gahan's esophagus had been burnt by the high temperature, and the purified water that entered Gahan's body through his esophagus was naturally spurting out from this hole. This was only the beginning. In the next 10 seconds, more and more of these burnt holes appeared on Gahan's body. At the same time, Gahan's consciousness became blurred, and it looked like Gahan would not be able to hold on for much longer. Fish. Big blue flower fish. Suddenly, Gahan's half-melted ears seemed to hear this. Big blue flower fish? The moment Gahan's consciousness was about to completely fade, he instinctively opened his dimensional pocket and released the large blue and white fish in his pocket. Chirp, chirp. Although he did not know why a big blue flower fish would make the chirp of a mouse, it became a sound that was like the sound of nature in Gahan's sleep. After the sound rang out, Gahan felt the temperature around his body begin to drop rapidly, as if he had returned to the normal world. At the same time, a drop of liquid with a fishy smell dripped into Gahan's mouth. Gahan felt a wave of comfort throughout his body, and the pain in his body disappeared. What replaced it was an indescribable itch. This itch was more than 1,000 times more painful than the itch caused by a mosquito. Gahan instinctively stretched out his hands, eager to scratch his body. You can't scratch, this is your body recovering. Gahan heard I Ching's voice again, but this time it was filled with an aged feeling. Chapter 733. After Hu knew how much time had passed, Gahan opened his eyes and found that his body had completely recovered. Even his charred skin had returned to its original color. Additionally, his skin was more delicate, like the skin of a newborn. Gahan could not help but recall how when Mayun looked when she first came out of the medical bay. When he looked again, he saw that the large cyan flower fish was swimming in the air. It was swimming in a perfect circle around Gahan. Blue, crystal-like snowflakes kept falling down from the scales of the large cyan flower fish. It seemed that it was because of these snowflakes that the temperature around Gahan had dropped to room temperature. He could no longer feel the shockingly high temperature of the furnace of heaven and earth. Husband! Gahan, you're finally awake! I Ching's aged voice rang in his ears. Gahan turned his head and saw I Ching sitting peacefully beside him. If it were not for the light of infatuation in her eyes, Gahan would have thought that she was just an old granny next door. You wanted to call me husband, didn't you? Gahan didn't expect that the first thing he said would be this sentence. However, after thinking about it carefully, ever since the beginning of the Heroes Begin with Insignificance Instance Dungeon, every time he met I Ching would always call Gahan husband. Just now, I Ching had even said the word husband out loud. In the end, she still called Gahan Gahan. Ching wouldn't dare. I Ching lowered her head in pain. How could Ching call husband husband in this state? After saying that, I Ching's expression became even more pained. Ching is old and weak. I wouldn't dare to blaspheme husband. I am also not fit to be husband's wife. Ching should just call husband Gahan. If it were not for the fact that Gahan did not like to complain, Gahan would have complained about I Ching's words. Although she said that she didn't dare to call Gahan husband, she called him husband more than anyone else. However, I Ching's husband made Gahan's heart ache. He could imagine how much pain I Ching would feel if she didn't even dare to call him husband because of his appearance. From now on, you will still call me husband. Otherwise, I won't say another word to you. Gahan looked at I Ching's face and said calmly but firmly, Husband. I Ching raised her head in surprise. Her wrinkled face had a pair of clear eyes that were as bright as a baby's. She was a little hesitant, but in the end, she still called out tentatively, "Husband." N. Guhan nodded and placed one of his hands on I Ching's cheek. Feeling its rough, granny-like skin, his voice suddenly became heavy. "I'm here." "Thank you, husband. Ching-er is so happy." I Ching, the old granny, laid on Gu Han's leg like a young girl and muttered to herself, "Husband, why are you so stupid? You jumped step by step into the furnace of heaven and earth. When did you become so stupid? If I didn't jump down on my own, how could I see you?" Guhan played with I Ching's hair. I Ching's body had become extremely old, but her hair, although pale, was full of tenacity like a young girl's hair. "Didn't you arrange so much just to make me jump down on my own?" Actually, when he first saw Zetianjiendi, Guhan did not suspect Zetianjiendi's identity. Zetianjiendi was very cold to him, and acted as if he didn't know Guhan at all. He didn't show any extra emotions. But at that time, Guhan did not suspect Jiendi at all, because he thought that I Ching might have some difficulties. Or perhaps the abnormal node had not been activated, and this storyline dungeon was still a normal storyline dungeon. Zetianjiendi was just a simple NPC, and I Ching's memories of the dungeon had not been activated. But when Guhan met Zetianjiendi for the second time, Guhan noticed that something was wrong. In the corner of the room there was something that looked like broken glass. For a house, this was not something to be suspicious about. Who didn't have some broken glass in their house? But this broken glass had left a deep impression on Guhan. It was not a piece of glass, but a piece of gemstone. This gemstone had an extraordinary meaning to I Ching. It was the necklace left behind by I Ching's mother. Guhan and I Ching had found it at the entrance of the Ibis shrine. Guhan clearly remembered that I Ching had hidden the necklace in her bosom. If Zetianjiendi was really I Ching, then he would not have treated the necklace like trash. Even if the necklace was accidentally broken, she would have collected all the fragments and treasured them like a treasure. From that moment onwards, Guhan started to doubt whether the Zetianjiendi in front of him was the real I Ching or not. What happened next was the strange reactions of Bast and Anubis. When Anubis heard Guhan's request, his first reaction was to run away with the white dwarf key that contained the saint's seed. Although Bast persuaded Anubis to spit out the white dwarf key, he still tried to stop Guhan from completing his mission. If it were not for Guhan's quick wits, Guhan would still be searching for that door. Bast also left the big viridescent flower fish for him. Although Guhan did not know why Bast left the big viridescent flower fish for him, now that he saw the safe environment created by the big viridescent flower fish, Guhan would be a complete fool if he still did not understand. What made Guhan the most suspicious was the saint's seed. The reason was simple. The saint's seed was in Anubis's stomach. Why didn't Zetianjiendi ask Anubis for it himself? Why did he have to turn around and ask Guhan to do this? Moreover, he wanted Guhan to go to I Ching's house. Actually, this was a completely unnecessary step. Going to I Ching's house was meaningless to the mission. At that time, Guhan had already guessed that Zetianjiendi was not I Ching at all. He did not know where the saint's seed was hidden at all. He might have become Zetianjiendi's tool, a tool to help him find the saint's seed. So hubby has found out. I Ching smiled like a young girl. Then why did hubby still barge in like an idiot? Wouldn't it have been better to hide far away with the saint's seed? But I wanted to see you. Guhan sighed. If I did not jump into the trap, how could I see you? Hubby. I Ching was extremely touched. She caressed Guhan's face with her hands, wanting to say something. However, she choked for a long time and did not say what she wanted to say. She only looked at the surrounding air that had turned orange-red. For the air to turn this color, it meant that the air was burning. The temperature outside of the large green flower fish was probably over 5,000 degrees Celsius. More importantly, the green flower fish's swimming speed was decreasing. If the green flower fish was a speeding sports car at the beginning, then it was at most a motorcycle now. It would not take long for the green flower fish to stop. When that happened, it would be the end of Gohan and I Ching. What's going on? Gohan's face was filled with doubt. Although I guess that this Zhetianjiendi is fake, I still don't know anything else. Who is this fake Zhetianjiendi? What happened between you two? I'm sorry, hubby. There are some things I can't tell you. Otherwise, the future won't be the real future. I Ching said helplessly. The future? Gohan's movement paused for a moment. He asked a question that had been lingering in his mind for a long time. Did we know each other in the past or in the future? Or will I return to the past one day in the future and meet you? This guess had been brewing in Gohan's mind for a long time. Combining everything that happened every time he met I Ching and I Ching's amazing prediction ability, Gohan could not help but suspect and guess that he would return to the past through the space-time tunnel one day in the future. Just like the beginning of the Heroes Begin at the End Dungeon, he met I Ching 700 years ago. In fact, in Gohan's mind, this guess could no longer be called a guess. Gohan was almost 90% sure that he would return to the past in the future. It's not like that. Unexpectedly, I Ching denied it directly. She shook her head. Hubby, you've always been smart. How could you not know that the future is always unpredictable? A future that you haven't seen with your own eyes is not the future. Hubby, don't think too much about it. When the future becomes the present, all the answers will appear on their own. I Ching's words were very confusing. Even Gohan could not understand the meaning of I Ching's words. However, Gohan knew that he would not be able to get the answer from I Ching. Then what's going on? Who is this fake Zhetianjiendi? Why did he do this to you? Gohan decided to first clarify the matter of the fake Zhetianjiendi. He's not fake. He did not expect I Ching to answer like this. He is the real Zhetianjiendi. Zhetian was originally named by him. My real emperor title is not Zhetianjiendi, but Sai of Cold Jiendi. From a certain point of view, he is the real Zhetianjiendi, and I am the fake Zhetianjiendi. He did not expect I Ching to give such an answer to Gohan. Sai of Cold Jiendi. No matter how stupid Gohan was, he could still understand. The so-called Sai of Cold Jiendi meant that she missed Gohan. I Ching, this silly girl, actually planned to put her longing for Gohan in the emperor title. What did Gohan do to deserve such love from I Ching? Chapter 734. My relationship with Zhetian is very strange. Due to some special reasons, I have to use the same identity as Zhetian, and I have to do everything with him. In reality, we're like conjoined twins, sharing the same organs. We can't be separated, or we'll both die. I Ching explained her relationship with Zhetianjiendi to Gohan, but it was clear that she was still hiding many things from Gohan. She chose not to talk about the most important information, only telling Gohan what she was willing to let Gohan know. Actually, Zhetian's original intentions weren't bad. It's just that his ideals were different from mine. He was unscrupulous when it came to doing things. He could sacrifice many lives for his own goals. At this point, I Ching sighed deeply. Later on, the differences between us got bigger and bigger, and the hatred between us got deeper and deeper. In the end, he didn't care about the bond between us. In the end, he decided to kill me and become the real sky-shrouding Sword Emperor. During that damned period, I couldn't hide many things from him, so he knew many of my secrets and knew of your existence. However, he didn't know about you. He only knew that you were the person I loved the most. If I had you in my hands, I would have to listen to him. Later on, we had to fight a great battle against the Heavenly Court. This battle concerned the future of humanity, as well as one of his ultimate goals. That's why I didn't suspect him at all. I never expected him to plot against me behind my back. As he spoke, I Ching's hand clenched into a fist, as if he wanted to punch Chitian with all his might. However, he underestimated my strength. I fought back at the last moment, and Yuentu's Avici twin swords were broken in that battle. However, he still won in the end. I was captured and imprisoned by him, and I've only met my husband now. Although he won, Yuentu's Avici twin swords were broken. He can't even be considered an immortal sword wielder. Furthermore, he has offended many people, especially the Yanjing city. There are countless people who want him dead. If it weren't for the Lun Yen clan suppressing him, he would have died long ago. People like him can't accept such a situation, so he has to find a way to repair the broken Yuentu and Avici swords. If you want to repair the Dharch sword, you must find the worldly furnace and the saint seed. Everyone in Jiendi knows the location of the furnace of heaven and earth, but no one knows where the sage seed is. As I said before, he knows some of my secrets, including the secret of the sage seed. He knows that I have a sage seed, but he doesn't know where it is hidden. Therefore, he began to torture me in various ways, wanting to force me to tell him about the sage seed. He has underestimated Qing too much. Since Qing could become Jiendi, how could she succumb to a little pain? In the end, he gave up on interrogating Qing and shifted his target to my husband. He believed that as long as he could capture my husband, he would definitely be able to use your life to force out information about the sage seed. But he has only heard of my husband's name. He doesn't know anything else about you. However, he knows that Isais and the others have interacted with you for a period of time. That's why he shifted his target to Isais and the others. Husband, please don't blame Isais and the others. At first, they were as loyal and unyielding as Qing but when Jetian used Anubis's life to force them, they had no other choice. Fortunately, you erased most of their memories before you left Qing. They only remember that you are from Yuzhang City, and that you will only appear after Yuzhang City appears. Jetian doesn't know anything about Yuzhang City, because there is no such city in this world. However, Jetian is very knowledgeable and knows that Yuzhang used to be an ancient name for NC City. He suspects that you are hiding near NC City, so he dug 3 feet into the ground to find you. At this point, I Ching seemed to think of something funny and laughed happily. Of course, Jetian's digging 3 feet into the ground couldn't be hidden from the people of Yanjing City, so he simply announced to the public that he wanted to build the second headquarters city in China and named it Yuzhang City. Everyone believed it. They all thought that Jetian wanted to make up for his regret of falling from Jiendi, so he wanted to use Yuzhang City to deeply carve his name in history, so that he could become a true Jiendi. Wait, you mean the reason why Jetian Jiendi built Yuzhang City was to find me? Gohan asked incredulously. He had always thought that Yuzhang City was built by I Ching, but he never thought that in the end, the source of Yuzhang City's founding was him. It was Jetian Jiendi who built Yuzhang City to find him. The beginning of Yuzhang City was just a lie. Yuzhang City was actually a city built on a lie. Husband, don't you think it's ridiculous? I Ching laughed again. In fact, this is a wonderful fate. It is like a low-quality online novel, arbitrarily altered by an invisible pen and an inaudible voice. We are just the pen's playthings. In fact, before you came, he was already very annoyed yesterday. Staying here day after day made his mind close to a state of collapse. If you had appeared a few days later, perhaps this lie would have collapsed on its own. Yesterday, he didn't know my husband at all. He had never seen my husband's face or seen his photo. He didn't even know my husband's name. Therefore, when his husband first appeared in front of him, he thought that his husband was just an ordinary sword wielder. Number 40 to 50 on the mission list was to repair the Yuentu and Avici twin swords. He randomly found 10 missions that were impossible for you to complete, so that you would never be able to complete this mission. At this point, I Ching revealed a bitter smile. However, no one expected that Lord Husband was once Anubis's master. Anubis could not refuse Lord Husband's orders. Moreover, Anubis happened to know that the key to repairing the Untu and Avicii twin swords was the sage seed. Coincidentally, the sage seed was hidden in Ching-Er's stomach, so he had to spit out the white dwarf key. So, Anubis wanted to escape and tried to escape to resist my orders, right? Hearing I Ching's words, Gohan also understood the coincidence. But why did Batet appear? There was no need for him to appear. That was because of my orders. I Ching smiled bitterly. Jetian thought that he had completely trapped me, but he did not know that because Bastet's divinity was in my hands, he could secretly communicate with me through the divinity. When he reported the news of your appearance to me, I decided to make the best of it and let the sage seed be in your hands. That way we would still have a chance of survival. But why are the steps for mission numbers 40 to 50 written so clearly on this mission list? Gohan took out the yellowing mission list. Just as he asked the question, he immediately slapped his head hard and came to a sudden realization. I understand now. Actually, when I first appeared in front of Batet, you had already made up your mind to do this. So, when I passed this mission list to Batet, Batet had already modified it. The mission for the big blue flower fish and the missions for number 40 to 50 were all modified by Batet, right? That's why this mission mysteriously ended at number 46, and there was not a single word on number 47 to 50. No, it wasn't modified later, it was always like this. I Ching revealed a sly smile. Batet pretended to betray me. When my husband completed the Anubis mission, he had already revealed the half-truth to Jetian. He told Jetian that the sage seed was hidden in my husband's house, and that the key was hidden in Anubis' stomach. My husband's personality is as unyielding as mine, so he could not force him through torture. He could only use the mission to lure my husband into taking out the sage seed. I see. No wonder Jetian Jiendi would wait for me here at the furnace of heaven and earth. At this point, the plot behind the dungeon was completely revealed. Jetian and I Ching had been toying with each other. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. In the end, all of this had fallen into I Ching's trap. But Ching-Er, why did you do this? Gohan looked at the big blue and white fish above him. At this moment, the speed of the big blue and white fish had decreased from the speed of a sports car to the speed of a bicycle. Moreover, the amount of crystalline powder falling from its body was also decreasing, and Gohan could even feel the temperature around him continuing to rise. This meant that the big blue and white fish's cooling protection was about to disappear. At this moment, the air outside the big blue and white fish's protective barrier had turned orange-red, and the entire air was burning. The temperature inside the furnace of heaven and earth was probably over 20,000 degrees Celsius. As soon as the big blue and white fish's protective barrier disappeared, Gohan and I Ching would instantly turn into a pile of ashes. That was why Gohan could not understand why I Ching's plan was to put both of them in such a dangerous situation. To repair the Untu and Avicii swords, not only does she need the furnace of heaven and earth and the sage seed, she also needs to fulfill a condition. I Ching suddenly said. What condition? Gohan asked subconsciously. The soul. The soul of the Untu and Avicii swords wielder. I Ching said with a smile. Chapter 735. Soul. Gohan murmured. Yes, it needs the soul of its wielder. I Ching smiled. The Untu and Avicii swords weren't simply broken, but they had worn each other's souls away during the fight. The souls of the two sword ladies have completely disappeared. Even if the Saint's Seed repaired their swords, I'm afraid the Untu and Avicii swords won't be able to transform into sword ladies after losing their souls. So, if you want to repair them completely, you have to inject a soul into the Untu and Avicii swords. This soul must have a deep connection with the Untu and Avicii swords. The only soul that can have such a connection is the soul of their wielder. I see. Yesterday, he wanted to refine your soul into the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, right? Hearing this, Gohan hated someone for the first time. He wanted to go out and kill him immediately. That person was the founder of Yuzhong City, the unparalleled Zhe Tianjiendi. Hey, isn't this what I experienced? Gu Yun suddenly said from Gohan's purple mansion. Gu Yun also injected her soul into the Doyu sword. It feels the same as Gu Yun. It's different from you, Gohan said in the purple mansion. Gu Yun's sword mark rolled in Gohan's purple mansion as if it was expressing its dissatisfaction. And then? What's your plan? Gohan looked at I Ching and asked curiously, since you knew that Tian needed your soul to repair the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, you still deliberately let me jump in. You must have a plan. I really can't hide anything from you, husband. I Ching stuck out her tongue. Logically speaking, a 70-something-year-old grandma suddenly sticking out her tongue was really not something people were used to seeing. Zetian and I are actually the wielder of the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. After the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords are repaired, whoever is closest to the two swords will be the first to obtain the ownership of the two swords. Husband, between me and Zetian, who is closest to the two swords? I Ching asked with a smile. Of course you're the closest. Both of you are locked in the furnace of heaven and earth with him, but do you think your soul is necessary to repair these two swords? You don't even have a soul anymore, so what's the point of obtaining these two swords? Gohan suddenly paused here, and a terrified expression appeared on his face. Ching you can't be thinking of, you can't be. It seems that my husband has already guessed it. I Ching smiled sweetly. Do you want to be the real Jiendi for once? Outside the furnace of heaven and earth, Zhe Tianjiendi was watching the scene inside nervously. Because the entire cauldron of heaven and earth was covered in scarlet flames, Zhe Tianjiendi couldn't see what was happening inside the cauldron of heaven and earth. Suddenly, the scarlet flames inside the cauldron of heaven and earth began to quickly retract, as if there was a black hole in the center of the cauldron of heaven and earth, sucking in all the flames. It's fixed. It's finally fixed. Zhe Tianjiendi stood up excitedly and jogged to the transparent lid of the cauldron of heaven and earth, wanting to see what was going on inside. Zhe Tianjiendi didn't care, even when the heat from the cauldron of heaven and earth made his skin smell like it was being roasted. Finally, all the scarlet flames disappeared, and the temperature of the cauldron of heaven and earth dropped rapidly. On this day, he finally saw what the center of the cauldron of heaven and earth looked like. Oh my Kanzu! But when Zhe Tianjiendi saw what was going on inside, he stumbled backwards and fell to the ground. He saw that the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords had indeed been repaired, glowing brightly with divine light and in perfect condition. In fact, they looked even stronger than before. But, the two swords weren't on the ground, but in someone else's hands, and that person's eyes just happened to look at Zhe Tianjiendi's position. When their gazes met, Zhe Tianjiendi fell to the ground in fright. He's still alive, how is that possible? Zhe Tian couldn't understand why the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords were in the hands of the military governor from Yanjing City. Shouldn't he have been burnt to ashes by the high temperature at the first moment? No, he's just bluffing. He's not the wielder of the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, how could he really use them? Once the lid is opened, the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords will fly back to me on their own. Zhe Jiendi suddenly regained his confidence. The Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords were definitely his, and the wielder of the military governor was just lucky enough to survive. I understand now. I Ching, you silly girl, you must have used up your last drop of imperial blood to save this idiot's life. Zhe Tianjiendi chuckled. But what's the point? So what if he survives the cauldron of heaven and earth? Does he still have the ability to survive my hands? But don't worry. If you love him so much, then I'll treat him well. I'll let him die a quick death. Perhaps that's what you're hoping for, silly girl. My silly girl. The heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor sneered as he stood up and looked at the transparent lid. When this furnace lid disappeared, it would be the time when he truly became a Sword Emperor. A minute later, when the last bit of light in front of Zetian Jendi disappeared, the moment Jendi had been waiting for had finally arrived. Come back, my Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. Zetian Jendi let out a loud cry. The Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords in Gohan's hands immediately flew towards Zetian Jendi, as if they were obeying Jendi's orders. Ha 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 ha. What's mine will always be mine. I can finally become a real Jendi. Seeing the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords flying towards him, Zetian Jendi was happy from the bottom of his heart. A serious little old man like him was actually behaving like a Chunibyu. My! Zetian Jendi was about to catch the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords that he had been looking forward to for a long time. Only then did he notice that it wasn't just the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords that flew back, but also Gohan, who no longer had any killing intent. There was no complicated and intense fight, nor was there a final struggle. Without the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, Zetian Jendi was just a spirit sword wielder. In this state, Zetian Jendi couldn't even defeat the original Gohan, let alone Gohan, who was now holding the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. These two swords lightly stabbed into Zetian Jendi's body, and Zetian Jendi's heart was torn into pieces. Then, Zetian Jendi's entire body was completely torn into molecules by the innate killing sword chi released by the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. In this situation, even the golden sovereign blood couldn't save Zetian Jendi. You can actually use the innate killing sword chi. Because Gohan's sword chi didn't touch Zetian Jendi's head, relying on the sovereign blood, Zetian Jendi, who only had a head left, was still able to maintain his consciousness and start a conversation with Gohan. P.S. Actually, there's a bug in this. Because Zetian Jendi only has a head left, his vocal cords should be damaged. Zetian Jendi can't actually speak. But the author doesn't intend to change it. It's enough to make everyone laugh. Of course, I'm now the wielder of the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, so of course I can use the innate killing sword chi of the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. What's so strange about that? Gohan asked. No. That's impossible. I'm the wielder of the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. Who do you think you are? You're just I Ching's lover. How can you use the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords? Tell me. Tell me. Tell me. Why is that? Why? The heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor's voice gradually became a little crazed. Clearly, he wanted to know what was happening in front of him. He wanted to know why Gohan could use the Yuan-Tu's Avicii twin swords. He was clearly the wielder of the Yuan-Tu's Avicii twin swords. The reason is simple, it's because, just as Zetian Jendi was about to listen to Gohan's explanation, a burst of innate killing sword chi exploded in Jendi's head. Yesterday, Jendi's head had exploded like a watermelon with a Samsung Note 7 in it. Zetian Jendi had been waiting for the answer to that question even as he died. Why didn't you tell him the truth? When Zetian Jendi was gone, the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords in Gohan's hands shifted, and I Ching reappeared in front of Gohan. She didn't look old anymore, and had returned to her most beautiful years. She looked exactly like the sweet I Ching Gohan had seen in Chongyang Mountain. I heard there was a rule before the apocalypse. Bad people can't talk nonsense before killing, and they can't explain anything or they'll die for sure. Gohan turned to I Ching. But we're not bad people. We're good people. I Ching didn't look happy at all, even though she'd killed her nemesis. Instead, she looked sad for Zetian Jendi's death. He was a pitiful man. I don't want him to die with so many questions in his head. I want him to die in peace and comfort. I Ching murmured. Sister I Ching. When I was still the Yu King, I understood one thing. I can't show any mercy to my enemies because my enemies died because of his mercy. The King of Yu suddenly appeared behind I Ching and said to her. However, this King of Yu looked a little strange. Compared to the original King of Yu, the current King of Yu was taller and his figure was fuller. More importantly, King Yu's appearance changed greatly. She looked extremely similar to I Ching, as if they were sisters. Chapter 736. Sister Queen Yu. Oh no, I think it's more appropriate to call you Sister of Ichi. I Ching turned around and looked at Queen Yu, who was like her own sister. She smiled and asked, "How is it? What's the difference between being an Emperor sword mistress and a famed sword mistress?" "It's very powerful." At this point, Queen Yu's fingertip trembled slightly, then a strand of innate killing sword chi surged out from her fingertip. This strand of sword chi shot into the ground and instantly blasted open a 10-meter deep crater. This was only Queen Yu's unconscious strand of innate killing sword chi. If Queen Yu consciously controlled this strand of sword chi, it wouldn't be a problem for her to blast open a 100-meter deep crater. "I can't help but want to destroy the world. This power is too hard to control." Queen Yu looked annoyed. It seemed like she couldn't deal with this power that she had lost control of. Everyone should have guessed that Queen Yu's soul and I Ching's soul had entered the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords, becoming the souls of one of the two swords. This was also why Gohan could use the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords. At the most critical moment in the cauldron of heaven and earth, I Ching had suggested letting her soul enter the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords and become Gohan's sword mistress, so that Gohan could use the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords' power to defeat Zetian. However, there was a huge problem. Zetian wasn't dead, so the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords couldn't be synchronized again. Only I Ching, who was also one of the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords, could use the repaired Yuan-Tu and Avici swords. This formed a paradox. I Ching's soul had to enter the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords to repair it. However, once I Ching's soul entered the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords, only Zetian could use the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords. However, this seemed to be within I Ching's expectations, so she quickly proposed a solution, which was to bring the soul of Gohan's sword Maiden into the Yuan-Tu and Avici dual swords. In any case, the Yuan-Tu and Avici dual swords were dual swords, so it was not a problem to accommodate two souls. In this way, the newborn Avici sword was innately connected with Gohan's Zifu. The Avici sword and the Avici sword were originally one. Once the Avici sword was connected with Gohan, the Avici sword would naturally be connected with Gohan. Then, Gohan would become the master of the Avici sword through another method. With the impending crisis, Gohan could only agree to I Ching's suggestion. However, I Ching was exceptionally firm in her choice of the sword Maiden. She insisted that King Yu must enter the Avici dual swords with her, and that no other sword maidens were allowed. When he thought of how I Ching used King Yu's mysterious liquid as a medium to unlock the White Dwarf key, Gohan felt that there seemed to be a special connection between King Yu and I Ching, so he did not object and agreed. However, this was not enough. To use a sovereign sword like the Avici sword, one must have more than 10 million quarks of sword essence. To solve this problem, I Ching used a mysterious technique that even Gohan did not know about to temporarily transfer the sword essence in her body to Gohan's body. This allowed Gohan to temporarily have more than 10 million quarks of sword essence. Since I Ching's soul was going to enter the Avici dual swords, it would be a waste if Gohan did not use the sword essence in his body. However, it was clear that this kind of sword essence obtained through trickery could not last long. After defeating Zetian, Gohan could feel the temporary sword essence in his body constantly decreasing. Originally, I Ching had transferred over 80 million quarks of sword essence to Gohan, but now there was only a little more than 30 million quarks of sword essence left. In another 20 minutes or so, all the temporary sword essence would dissipate, and the Avici dual swords would return to their sword form. When Gohan truly had more than 10 million quarks of sword essence, the Avici dual swords would be able to transform into sword maidens once more. However, Gohan did not take this to heart. At the end of the day, this world was still a dungeon world. Once he returned to the main world of the game, King Yu should return to his original state, and the Avicii dual swords would no longer have anything to do with Gohan. System prompt: the dungeon will close in 10 minutes. Players, please be prepared. The sudden system prompt shocked Gohan. He thought that this dungeon would not have any more system prompts. Ever since the second quest was given, the dungeon had not given Gohan any more system prompts. This was very strange. The guide on the forum clearly stated that this system prompt would continue until the fifth quest. Gohan looked at the time. The dungeon had been going on for nearly 40 hours. No wonder the system prompt said that the dungeon would close in 10 minutes. I have to leave in 10 minutes. Can you leave with me this time? Gohan asked as he held I Ching's hand, even though he knew that it was impossible. Darling, you must be joking. Ching-er's existence depends on this instance dungeon. Now that this instance dungeon is about to end, Ching-er's mission has been accomplished. Ching-er wants to go where she belongs, I Ching said with a smile. However, there was a hint of pity in her eyes. I owe you too much. Gohan's heart ached. If it was possible, he wanted to keep I Ching by his side even if he had to pierce through the sky. Darling, don't be sad. Ching-er is not dead. Ching-er is still waiting for you in the world above. I Ching's eyes turned into crescent moons as she smiled. Ching-er, I have a question. Is everything that I experienced in this dungeon real? Did you really become one with the Avicii dual swords in the real world? This was the question that had been lingering in Gohan's heart since the beginning. If the history that he experienced in this dungeon was real history, then wouldn't that mean that 700 years ago, I Ching became the sword lady of the Avicii dual swords in order to defeat Jetian? However, according to historical records, Jiandi died 12 years after Yuzhong City was built. There were still 21 years since then. Then who played the role of Jetian Jiandi in these 21 years? If the sword lady of the Avicii dual swords was really I Ching, then why did Gohan have to go to another world to see I Ching? As long as he could find a way to synchronize with the Avicii dual swords in the real world, he would be able to see the real I Ching. It was real, but from now on, it's fake. I Ching's words became incomprehensible again. Don't guess. Just wait for the right time, then. The truth will jump out on its own. Gohan rolled his eyes at I Ching. Fine, then I'll wait patiently. There's one more thing. It's about King Yu. I don't think I need to repeat what it is. You will definitely be able to help me, right? Of course. Ching-er is here to solve this problem. I Ching grinned. My husband, do you believe that I won't be able to solve this problem? Actually, you experienced so many things in the instance dungeon. At the end of the day, it's just to help little sister King Yu. Gohan was speechless. He really did not expect that such a troublesome and exciting instance dungeon was just to help King Yu. Then tell me, what should I do? Gohan pulled King Yu, who had his head lowered, to his side. What should I do? Only then can I make King Yu stay by my side forever. At the very least, I have to make it so that no one can take her away. Who else in this world can take away husband's things? I Ching suddenly pulled King Yu into her arms. She lifted King Yu's bangs and made the extremely shy King Yu look straight into Gohan's eyes. Husband, actually, from the moment you jumped into the electric furnace for King Yu, no one can take away your King Yu. From the moment I jumped into the electric furnace, no one can take away my King Yu. Hearing this, Gohan's first reaction was the furnace of heaven and earth. However, he immediately understood that this was wrong. After all, he didn't jump into the furnace for King Yu, but for I Ching. However, when he thought about it carefully, a few months ago, he had indeed jumped into the electric furnace for King Yu. That was after the Wudong Sect's Apex dungeon. At that time, King Yu was almost completely broken. Even a Grandmaster swordsmith could not completely repair the last wound on King Yu's body. In the end, Gohan jumped into the electric furnace without a care for his own safety and used his own body to repair the last wound on King Yu. Could it be that I Ching meant that after that restoration, no one would be able to take away his King of Yu title? Guhan suddenly remembered that ever since he repaired King Yu gradually lost many of her memories. For example, the memories between her and Kenzu were constantly being forgotten. Instead, the memories before she became the Sword Maiden became clearer. It seems that my husband has guessed it. Even if King Yu Go Jianjian's original body comes online, King Yu won't leave my husband, because King Yu already belongs to my husband alone. What nonsense are you spouting? Before Guhan could react, the King of Yu became irritated. You say I'm not the King of Yu Go Jianjian? Then what am I? Did it pop out of a rock? As the King of Yu spoke, over 108 killing path sword cheese shot out from his body. All the nearby hills and plants were instantly razed to the ground. Smoke and dust filled the air, covering the sky and the sun. It was as if the world had entered the end of the world. Everyone had to understand King Yu's sudden outburst of emotions. It was as if one day, someone suddenly told you that you weren't you but someone else. You would probably collapse from being unable to believe reality. I don't care what you are, but you're definitely not the King of Yu Go Jianjian, I Ching said coldly. You're my husband's Sword Maiden. That's all. Chapter 737. That's why. Even if Yu King Go Jianjian's main body has entered the game, Yu King will not leave me, right? Guhan forcefully interrupted the argument between Yu King and I Ching. Of course. Yu King and Yu King Go Jianjian are no longer related. I Ching nodded. Hearing I Ching confirm this point, Guhan was speechless. That means my 40 hours of hard work were all for nothing. Even if I did nothing, Yu King will not leave me. It's like this, husband, you're too smart. I Ching's flattery was lacking. At the same time, in the main world of the game, in the tea house that Guhan often drank tea at, Ku Rock-in and Yu King Go Jianjian were sitting at Guhan's usual spot. Jules Vren took small sips of the tea in his hand, while the King of Yu Go Jianjian closed his eyes, thinking about something. How is it? Have the fragments of consciousness returned? The anxious Ku Rock-in suddenly saw Yu King Go Jianjian slowly open his eyes and immediately asked. They're almost back. Yu King Go Jianjian nodded slightly. I didn't expect so many things to happen in 30 years. However, these fragments of consciousness are just some boring memories. You humans haven't changed at all after 30 years. You bastards! It was unknown what Yu King Go Jianjian's other fragments had experienced, or what experiences they had. However, from Yu King Go Jianjian's ashen face, these fragments did not give Yu King Go Jianjian many happy memories. There's still one missing. Yu King Go Jianjian suddenly frowned. There's still one missing? What's so strange about that? Isn't this something that happens often? There will always be some fragments that disappear because of some shameless scum's actions. I apologize on behalf of those beasts. When Ku Rock-in spoke, he was completely relying on the King of Yu Go Jianjian. He was afraid that if he said anything wrong, he would make this ancestor unhappy. To Ku Rock-in, the King of Yu's Go Jian sword was too precious. In order to obtain the King of Yu's Go Jian sword, Ku Rock-in's real body was still locked up in the prison. How could he dare to be disrespectful to the King of Yu's Go Jian sword? It has nothing to do with you. Why are you apologizing for them? The King of Yu Go Jianjian and the others glanced at Jules Vren. If that consciousness fragment was destroyed because of some B** stars, then the system will definitely leave a message for me to tell me the whole story. But the system hasn't given me any information. More importantly, I can vaguely sense the existence of that consciousness fragment, but no matter how I call out to her, she doesn't respond. It's as if she's become an independent entity. The King of Yu Go Jianjian frowned even harder. That's impossible. In the past 200 years, I've never heard of a Sword Maiden's consciousness fragment separating from the main body and becoming an independent entity. Did you sense wrongly? Ku-rak-in asked carefully. Impossible. My senses can't be wrong. Something must have happened to that consciousness fragment. Let's go now. As he spoke, King of Yu, Go Jian's sword suddenly stood up and quickly walked out of the tea-house. Lady, where are you going? Ku-rak-in hurriedly ran out of the tea-house. To Jiang'a. King of Yu, Go Jian's sword's melodious voice rang out. I want to investigate, in the past 30 years, who exactly coordinated my consciousness fragment away. Looks like our efforts weren't completely wasted. I Ching leaned into Gohan's embrace and said softly. At least this dungeon allowed Ching heir to see husband again. Big sister, I Ching saw husband and there was quite a scene. You want us to work hard for 40 hours before you're willing to tell us the truth. Why didn't you tell your husband the moment he entered the instance dungeon? That way you could have saved 40 hours of flirting with each other. How great would that be? King Yu said in a sarcastic and sour tone. So little sister King of Yu changed her address at this time. I Ching suddenly changed the topic and said this out of the blue. What do you mean? What do you mean? King of Yu didn't understand and asked angrily. Of course it's to call husband husband. I Ching chuckled. This sovereign once asked little sister King of Yu when you changed to call husband husband, but little sister King of Yu refused to answer this sovereign's question, so this became a huge question in this sovereign's heart. Who would have thought that I would change my address at this time? Actually, little sister King of Yu, you don't know, but this sovereign learned how to call husband husband from you. What the hell are you talking about? I don't understand a single word. King of Yu took a few steps back and blushed. Who called that stinky thing Gohan husband? Stinky Gohan. Stinky Gohan. Stinky Gohan. You two stop messing around. There's not much time left. We have to leave the dungeon in 5 minutes. Gohan covered her mouth, which was still muttering smelly Gohan. She turned to I Ching and said in a serious tone, This dungeon can't be that simple. I Ching, tell me, what is your real purpose in designing this dungeon? Husband has wronged Ching heir. Ching heir really just wants to help husband and little sister King of Yu. I Ching raised her head and the corners of her eyes sparkled again. She pulled King Yu's hand and the two of them looked at each other. Little sister King of Yu, tell me, do you want to be with husband in the game forever? Don't you want to be with husband in the real world? I. King of Yu hesitated for a while before stomping her feet and replying loudly, I don't want to. I want to be with that bastard Gohan forever. Whether it's in the game or in the real world, I want to be with him forever. After saying this, King of Yu regretted it. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Well said, little sister. These are Ching heir's words and all of us women's thoughts. There's nothing to be shy about. Who doesn't want to be with husband forever? Who doesn't want to receive husband's love every day? It's just that Ching heir's life is short and can't always be by husband's side like little sister King of Yu. So little sister King of Yu, you must take good care of husband in the future. Let him live a long and happy life. Even if he suffers all sorts of setbacks and pain, little sister will be with husband to share and endure it. I Ching's words came from the bottom of her heart and were deeply moving. Not only was King of Yu moved, even Gohan's heart couldn't help but beat wildly. He wanted to keep this woman who loved him forever by his side. But big sister, if it's really as you said, then I'm just a fragment of consciousness. I'm like a lonely ghost that can only slowly drift in this game world. How can I appear by husband's side in the real world? King of Yu bit her lips and choked with sobs. I thought I could rely on my main body in the real world, but now... This is the real reason why I let you and husband come to this instant's dungeon. I Ching wiped away the tears on King of Yu's face. Little sister King of Yu, listen to me. Right now, you are no longer just a fragment of consciousness. You have a complete soul like every sword maiden. Right now, you only need a suitable sword maiden body. You just need to let husband find an empty sword maiden body that can synchronize with your soul in the real world. Then, just like what I taught you in the furnace of heaven and earth, borrow the flames and sword essence of the furnace of heaven and earth to enter the empty sword maiden body. Then, you will become a brand new sword maiden. A complete sword maiden. A sword maiden that is the same as all the other sword maidens. She can freely enter and exit the game and the real world and be with husband forever. Do you understand? Is what you said true? As long as I find an empty sword maiden body, I can become a brand new sword maiden. King Yu's face was filled with disbelief. She hugged I Ching's waist and asked over and over again with excitement and trembling. Then, she fell into a state of ecstasy. In the past 40 hours, she could finally put down the biggest stone in her heart. King of Yu fell into ecstasy, but Gohan remained calm. Perhaps the method I Ching told King of Yu could allow her to be reborn in the real world, but it was incredibly difficult. It was even more difficult than asking Gohan to kill the universe realm Yuan Ko. Ching does the method you mentioned just now require the use of the furnace of heaven and earth? Gohan suddenly asked. That's right. Fusing the soul into a sword maiden body is an extremely heaven-defying matter, so it requires the power of the world. Only the furnace of heaven and earth can have this power. Husband, you must activate the furnace of heaven and earth. That's easy for you to say, but how do I get so much sovereign blood? Gohan's expression could no longer be described as unsightly. This was an unsolvable problem for Gohan. According to his experience in the Instance Dungeon, if he wanted to activate the furnace of heaven and earth, he would need at least 5,500 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood. This 5,500 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood was equivalent to 2/3 of Jiandi's HP. You want Gohan to ask how Tian Jiandi and Longshi Jiandi for 2/3 of their sovereign blood? This was simply impossible. Even if Gohan was the son of Jiandis, the two Jiandis wouldn't give 2/3 of their sovereign blood to Gohan. Chapter 738. 5,500 cubic centimeters is the amount needed to repair the Emperor's sword. A famed sword lady doesn't need that much. I Ching waved her hand. That's more like it. Gohan heaved a sigh of relief. If it was only a few hundred cc, then Gohan could still think of something. Gohan knew that there were more than 1,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor blood in Yuzhong City's treasury. Through his relationship with Lu Lei, he might be able to take out a few hundred cc for emergencies. Not much. A 4,000 cubic centimeters is enough. However, I Ching's following words made Gohan's face turn ashen. To Gohan, 4,000 cubic centimeters and 5,500 cubic centimeters didn't seem to make much of a difference. If Gohan could get 4,000 cubic centimeters, then it wouldn't be difficult to get 5,500 cubic centimeters. In any case, he couldn't get it. Husband, don't worry. Ching has already thought of this for you. I Ching smiled and said, 700 years ago, someone wrote an IOU to Ching. Although this IOU isn't much, it's not a problem for husband to exchange for more than 10,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor blood. More than 10,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor blood. That's not much. What kind of IOU did that person write to I Ching for it to be worth more than 10,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor blood? The value of this Emperor blood was probably enough to buy 1/10 of Yuzhong City. Where is the IOU? Gohan asked. Ching has already told husband the address of the IOU. Husband only needs to go and get it yourself. I Ching's words became strange again. When did she tell Gohan the address of the IOU? However, Gohan seemed to understand what I Ching meant. He nodded and said, "All right, I'll try to find it there." Don't worry, husband. Ching promises husband that the IOU is still there. I Ching smiled. Emperor blood is only one problem. The more important thing is the sword lady's body you mentioned. Do I need to find a broken sword lady to be King Yu's new body? King Yu was currently using the broken Avicii sword's body. Did he want Gohan to break the Avicii sword again and replace it with King Yu's body? No. I Ching shook his head and said, "The sword lady's body needs a pure body, and there can't be a soul inside. All the sword maidens that were broken did not really die. Their souls were still hidden in the sword. Otherwise, how could those sword maidens that were broken even talk about being repaired? If King Yu wants to be reborn, he must have a sword maiden body that has lost its soul. A normal sword maiden definitely won't do." Nonsense. Then why would the UN2 Avicii twin swords work? King Yu retorted. Because the souls of UN2 and Avicii swords have completely perished. I Ching sighed. When I was ambushed by Zhetian and was about to die at the hands of the Jade Emperor, it was UN2 who sacrificed her soul to self-destruct. She gravely injured the Jade Emperor and destroyed Avicii's soul as well. Therefore, the UN2 and Avicii twin swords have long lost their souls. King Yu, you are able to occupy the Avicii twin sword's body. I see. King Yu nodded in understanding. Then we just have to find the sword maiden's body whose soul has also perished. I remember that many sword maidens in history reached this step. There were even 2 immortal sword maidens. That's impossible. I Ching did not speak. Gohan said directly, "According to the agreement between us humans and sword maidens, if the sword maiden's soul completely disappears and cannot be repaired, humans will melt their bodies once again and scatter them into this land. They will return to where they came from. Since ancient times, all the sword maidens have been buried like this. It is impossible for us to find the sword maiden's body whose soul has perished. Don't worry. If the past is gone, then I'll just wait for the future. In 8 to 10 years, there will be an unlucky sword maiden that will appear. At that time, I will be too embarrassed to disturb her rest." King Yu said. "No, that's too passive." Gohan shook his head. "This kind of thing is rare. Even if I wait 8 to 10 years, I might not encounter such an opportunity. What if it doesn't come in 8 to 10 years? What if it doesn't come in 30 to 40 years? Then King Yu, won't you forever? This is already the best ending. What else can I ask for?" Facing Gohan's objection, King Yu smiled freely. "Originally, I didn't have any hope when I came to this dungeon. I just want to be able to spend some time with you, husband. Every minute counts as a minute for me. Then, before I receive the summons from the main body, I will erase all of my memories. I will never let you down. Even if the situation is better, I will only be separated from the game and locked in a cage that will never see the light of day. Right now I am already very satisfied. Although I can't enter reality, I can return to my previous life. Every day, I will sit in the house and wait for my husband to come online, whisper a few words to me, do some embarrassing things. Actually, this kind of life is already very perfect for me. I don't have any more extravagant wishes. Husband, listen to King Yu, let this matter end like this. Actually, our lives haven't changed at all. It's still the same as before, isn't it?" When King Yu said this, she was choking with sobs. With a trembling voice, she threw herself into Gohan's arms, and then she burst into tears. "Everything will be fine." Seeing this, I Ching revealed a mysterious smile and slowly walked behind King Yu. He patted her back and whispered into her ear, "Don't worry, King Yu, I'll be fine." "Husband, it's time. Ching has said all that needs to be said. Please take care of yourself, husband. Ching will see you again sooner or later." I Ching looked at Gohan with the same hot tears in her eyes as she said, "Ching wait, I still have something to say." Before Gohan could finish, the entire world darkened. When light once again appeared in front of Gohan, Gohan had already arrived in a steel forest. "Hello, Cashier 0791 is at your service." Seeing the familiar beautiful Cashier 0791, Gohan knew that he had returned to the Instance Dungeon's settlement center. Rise from the Ground had already come to an end. There was nothing much to say after that. Gohan completed all the quests on the quest list and naturally received an SSS rating as a reward. After the Instance Dungeon ended, the rewards given to Gohan were routine. The only thing worth looking forward to was the treasure that the golden egg at the end could produce. Congratulations to player Military Governor. You have opened the golden egg and obtained a precious bottle of Emperor's blood, 20 drops. Gohan opened the golden egg and obtained a bottle of 20 drops of Emperor's blood. Emperor's blood. Healing item. Tradable. Unbound. Drops upon death. Quantity 20 drops. Description: Jiandi's blood can quickly recover the player's injuries and the sword essence in the player's body. Usage effect: each drop of Emperor's blood can recover 50% of the player's body damage and recover 100,000 sword essence points. Remark: the sword essence points recovered cannot exceed the player's sword essence limit. Looking at this reward, Gohan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Whatever he wanted, it really came true. If this small bottle of 20 drops of Emperor's blood was sold, it could be sold for at least 1 million renminbi. However, these 20 drops of Emperor's blood added together was probably less than 1 cubic centimeter. Gohan needed more than 4,000 bottles of such Emperor's blood. In terms of money, it would be 4 billion. But then again, if Emperor's blood could really be bought with money, then Gohan couldn't ask for more. Because at this time, Gohan's account had a total of 72 billion renminbi. This was the gambling reward that Gohan had obtained from defeating the number 1 sword wielder of the Spirit Sword level in the 8 Cities Sword Tournament. Because there were less than 100 players who bought this option in the entire game, and among these 100 players, only Gohan had bet more than 10 million. Therefore, of the nearly 80 billion renminbi that all the players had bet on Gohan, in the end, more than 89% of it went into Gohan's account. Unknowingly, Gohan had become one of the richest people in the human world. If there was a ranking list of the richest people, Gohan would probably be able to rank around 100. Taking out 4 billion to buy Emperor's blood was just a small gesture for the current Gohan. Unfortunately, this was not realistic, because in the real world, Emperor's blood that could be traded didn't even have 40 cubic centimeters, let alone 4,000 cubic centimeters. Even if Gohan wanted to buy it, he wouldn't be able to find a place. Right now, it seemed that he could only pin his hopes on the promissory note that I Ching had left behind. Ding dong. System prompt. All channel broadcast. Player Military Governor has broken the highest dungeon evaluation record for the dungeon Rise from the Ground. The original record of SS has been broken, and the new record is SSS. Let me congratulate Player Military Governor. He has created a new era. In the game, this system prompt rang in the ears of all the players. However, at this time, the players were very calm as they were already used to this kind of thing. It was Military Governor, after all. What was so strange about him breaking 1 or 2 dungeon records? If Military Governor failed to complete a dungeon, it would be super news. Therefore, even after the system prompt rang out 3 times, there was no commotion in the Sword Tower. Everyone was still focused on what they were doing. A sword mistress suddenly raised her head, her face full of shock. Someone actually got an SSS evaluation in the Rise from the Ground dungeon. Yu King Go Jian's face was full of disbelief. Someone actually got an SSS evaluation in this dungeon. Is that strange? Ku Rakin, who was sitting opposite Yu King Go Jian, said with his mouth twitched. Of course it's strange. Yu King Go Jian said as he sat upright. 90 years ago, I entered this dungeon with the sword-bearer at that time. The two of us tried almost 200 times, increasing the completion speed of all the missions on the list to the maximum. We completed all the missions from 1 to 40, but we couldn't activate the last 10 missions, and could only get an SS evaluation. Later on, the sword-bearer and I discovered a fatal bug in the game, so we concluded that this dungeon could at most have an SS evaluation. We even wrote the most complete dungeon strategy. In this world, no one can get an SSS evaluation. Alright, so the strategy Gohan found on the forum was written by Yu King Go Jian and her sword-bearer at that time. Chapter 739. There's nothing strange about it. It's because the military governor was the one who completed the quest. Kurakin shrugged. It was obvious that he was impressed by the military governor. He instinctively thought that the military governor deserved an SSS rating. It seems like you have a very high opinion of him. Do you know this military governor? Although he had not spent much time with Kurakin, the king of Yugojian, who had over 1,000 years of experience, could easily see through Kurakin's nature. He knew that he was a teenager who refused to admit defeat. To be able to convince such a Chunibu youth so naturally and wholeheartedly, this inspector was definitely not a simple fellow. I've never seen the military governor in the game, but I've seen the military governor in real life. His name is Guhan in real life. He's the master of our Yuzhong city's previous Kendo cabinet master and the current Kendo cabinet master. Kurakin was such a disloyal guy. With just a few words, he revealed Gohan's background to the king of Yugojian. The previous Kendo cabinet master? Then wouldn't he be an old man in his 70s or 80s? Why would he still be interested in clearing a famed sword-level dungeon? The king of Yugojian asked in confusion. I didn't tell you that he's an old man in his 70s or 80s, Kurakin quickly said. I think he just turned 18 this year, the same age as me. He's just a famed sword wielder. Oh, that's right. Speaking up to this point, Zhu Luren suddenly thought of something. His famous sword-rank sword lady is the same as mine. They're both yours, your highness. What? Say it again. Who's his famed sword lady? The king of Yugojian suddenly became anxious. It's all because of you, my lady. Kurakin did not know what the king of Yugojian was worried about. He replied dryly, I don't know who his famed sword-tier sword mistress is in real life, but I can confirm that his in-game famed sword-tier sword mistress is the king of Yugojian. This is something that all the players in the game know. The sword maiden that he used in the 8 Cities sword tournament was you, my lady. Pa! The king of Yugojian forcefully closed the booklet in his hand. The sound was so loud that everyone around him jumped in fright. I know what it is. Seems like the key to the problem lies with this military governor. Take me to him now. With that, the king of Yugojian put down his book and dragged the confused Kurakin out of the sword pavilion. The booklet that the king of Yugojian left on the table had a name written on it, the list of previous king of Yugojian's sword-bearers. This was a list that only the sword lady could read. It recorded the names of all the sword-bearers that had coordinated with the sword lady. It seemed like the king of Yugojian did not find the military governor's name on the list. Is he still in the game? Song Yifei quietly pushed open a door and saw that Guhan was still lying on the bed with his helmet on. He could only sigh slightly, and then poured all the delicious food on the table into the trash can. It's been almost 2 days. Why hasn't Gohan come out yet? If this goes on, Gohan's body won't be able to take it. Song Yifei was extremely worried about Gohan's body, but there was nothing she could do. She could only painstakingly prepare a table full of delicacies. When she realized that Gohan did not show any signs of waking up, she dumped all the delicacies on the table into the rubbish bin. Let me rest for a while. Song Yifei quietly pushed open the door and tiptoed into Gohan's room. She bent her body and lay down beside Gohan. As Gohan was sleeping on a single bed, and Gohan was sleeping in the middle of the bed, there was not much space for a person to sleep on either side of the bed. Song Yifei could only curl up her body and try her best to ensure that she did not fall off the bed. One could imagine the quality of sleep in such a situation. It was almost impossible to have a good night's sleep, but Song Yifei still enjoyed it. For the past 2 days, Song Yifei had used this method to sleep beside Gohan. She used an extremely humble and pitiful position to enjoy the time she spent with Gohan. "Who is it?" Suddenly, Song Yifei felt an arm around her waist, and Gohan's low voice sounded in her ears. "It's me, Song Yifei. I'm just tired. Take a little rest. I'll leave right away." Song Yifei, who was embarrassed, wanted to escape from Gohan's bed immediately. However, she did not expect that Gohan's hand was tightly around Song Yifei's waist. Song Yifei used all her strength but could not break free from Gohan's hand. Instead, Gohan hugged her tighter and tighter. In the end, her whole body exploded in Gohan's arms. "I like the smell of your body very much. Let me sleep quietly for a while." Gohan's low voice made Song Yifei's whole body numb. "He likes the smell of my body very much." Thinking of what Gohan had said, Song Yifei's whole body became soft, and she did not have the strength to escape. He could only allow himself to become a human-shaped pillow and be hugged by Gohan. After struggling with himself for a while, he fell into a deep dream in a daze. This was the best sleep Song Yifei had had in the past 2 days. Song Yifei and Gohan were awakened from their sweet dreams by a series of rapid knocking on the door. After knocking for about 10 minutes, Song Yifei, who was in a daze and disheveled, climbed up from Gohan's side angrily and opened the door. "What are you knocking for? Knock me to death." As soon as she opened the door, Song Yifei scolded the person in front of her. It was an unlucky young man who was scolded by Song Yifei. He took out a handkerchief to wipe the saliva off his face and asked fearfully, "Excuse me? Does Master Gohan live here?" "Yes, he is resting." "Why are you looking for him? It's the same if you tell me." At this time, Song Yifei had mostly recovered his calmness. He no longer put on a sour face, and his temperament became gentle. Especially when Song Yifei said, "It's the same even if you tell me." His whole body was filled with a sense of satisfaction. "Mrs. Gu, hello. I am a member of the Public Traffic Safety Department of Beijing's Ministry of Transportation. I have some questions to discuss with Master Gohan. Is it convenient for you now?" This poor young man was indeed a member of the Public Traffic Safety Department of Beijing's Ministry of Transportation. Song Yifei immediately smiled when he heard the words, "Mrs. Gu," and he very warmly invited this young man into his home. After some unsmooth communication, Song Yifei finally understood why this member of the Ministry of Transportation was looking for Gohan. It turned out that he was looking for Gohan because of the white shadow speeding case that shocked the entire Beijing's Ministry of Transportation. The whole Ministry of Transportation was scolded by the Beijing City Council. The leader who was in charge of this incident was directly removed from his position, and it was said that the minister of the Ministry of Transportation was also involved in a lawsuit. Although the council did not remove him from his position, the higher-ups had already given the order. After the next round of election of the council, this 50-year-old minister of the Ministry of Transportation with a bright future would directly retire and go home to be an old cadre who cared about society. The personnel change in the Ministry of Transportation was just the beginning. What gave the Ministry of Transportation a bigger headache was how to deal with the perpetrator of the white shadow speeding case. The identity of the person who was speeding was very easy to check. After all, Gohan got out of the car in front of more than a dozen surveillance cameras. In less than an hour, the Ministry of Transportation had confirmed Gohan's identity. But it didn't matter if they didn't confirm it. Once they confirmed it, it gave the Ministry of Transportation a bigger headache. Because this person was not an ordinary person, but a sword-bearer from Yuzhong City. This sword-bearer was the F*King former head of Yuzhong City's Sword Garret. With so many identities in front of the minister of the Ministry of Transportation, the minister directly resigned and went home in advance, leaving the hot potato to his successor. If Guhan was not the sword-bearer of Yuzhong City, but the sword-bearer of Yanjing City, it would not be too troublesome. The case would be directly reported to the Yanjing City Sword Committee, and the rest would be handled by the Yanjing City Sword Committee itself. There was no need for the Ministry of Transportation to manage anything. Unfortunately, Guhan was the sword-bearer of Yuzhong City. Although, in theory, once a sword-bearer of Yuzhong City committed a crime in Yanjing City, the Yanjing City Sword Committee also had the right to deal with this sword-bearer. But in fact, the Yanjing City Sword Committee could not intervene in this case, because, from a legal point of view, this was not a case serious enough to require the Yanjing City Sword Committee's management. This was just an ordinary speeding case. Moreover, this speeding case didn't cause any casualties, nor did it cause any serious consequences. If the Yanjing City Sword Committee took over this case, it would obviously give everyone the feeling that the big was bullying the small, not to mention that Guhan was the former head of Yuzhong City's Sword Garret. The Yanjing City Sword Committee had to obtain the approval of the Human Sword Committee. Therefore, the Yanjing City Sword Committee simply ignored this case and pretended not to know about it, lest it got into trouble if it intervened. Even the Yanjing City Sword Committee did not want to intervene, so the Yanjing City Ministry of Transportation naturally did not want to intervene. But this case had a very bad influence. Many people in Yanjing knew that there was an arrogant man from Yuzhong City who dared to drive a sports car around in Yanjing City, which meant that he did not respect the men in Yanjing City at all. Some lazy men who had nothing better to do all day even went to the council to protest. As a result, the council issued a strict order to the Ministry of Transportation to solve this case perfectly. Otherwise, nobody in the Ministry of Transportation would be able to get away with it. After 2 days of chaos caused by the resignation of the Minister of Transportation, the newly appointed Minister of Transportation very unkindly threw this hot task to an unlucky staff member who had been in the Ministry of Transportation for less than a year, who was standing in front of Song Yifei, and asked him to invite the sword-bearer Guhan to the Ministry of Transportation to solve this case. Chapter 740. When Song Yifei understood the whole story, she was shocked to realize that she couldn't make the decision for Guhan. She didn't know why Guhan would do something like racing, nor did she know how to reply to this young man for Guhan. "Do you want Guhan to go to the Ministry of Transportation now?" Song Yifei decided to clarify the matter first. If possible, now is naturally the best time. The clerk silently observed Song Yifei's expression. When he saw that she looked unhappy, actually, it was an expression of not knowing what to do. He immediately waved his hand and changed his word. "Actually, it's not necessary to go today. I'm just here to inform Sir Guhan. As long as Sir Guhan can rush to the Ministry of Transportation to deal with this matter within 3 days, there will be no problem." Within 3 days. Song Yifei was still muttering to herself. She didn't know if she should agree to Guhan's request. Therefore, the atmosphere in the living room suddenly became gloomy. "Sure. I'll be there within 3 days." At this moment, Guhan, who was also disheveled, walked out of Song Yifei's bedroom and said to the unlucky clerk. The clerk immediately got up to leave as if he had been pardoned. As he left, he even bowed and said that he had disturbed Sir and Madam's sweet dreams and hoped that Sir and Madam wouldn't be offended. "What exactly is going on? Guhan, why did you race when you were fine?" As soon as the clerk left, Song Yifei immediately got up and asked Guhan. "I can't explain it to you in a short time. Anyway, it has nothing to do with you." Guhan didn't have any ill intentions, but in Song Yifei's ears, it became Guhan's disgust and indifference towards her. This made Song Yifei's expression instantly dim. The sweet smile on her face also became extremely awkward. She stood up and walked in the direction of the kitchen. She said that she was going to prepare dinner for Guhan, but in reality, she wanted to escape from this painful and embarrassing place. Guhan didn't have time to care about Song Yifei's feelings. Right now, the matter with King Yu was more important to him. Although there was some progress and King Yu expressed that he was willing to wait for the Sword Lady's soul to dissipate before considering coming to the real world. However, Gohan did not want to do this. Gohan knew better than anyone how much the King of Yu wanted to return to reality. He definitely would not let the King of Yu wait for another 8 to 10 years. He had to solve this problem immediately. After Gohan sent the clerk away, he immediately accessed the internet through his personal terminal and began to search for information on all the broken sword maidens since ancient times. He wanted to see if there was a broken sword maiden that had lost its soul but did not melt. It was not an easy task to find such information. This was because this involved a whole 1,000 years of time. If there really was such a broken sword maiden, the officials would definitely try their best to hide this information and would never openly post it on the internet. If Gohan wanted to find the information he needed, he had to find all sorts of clues on the internet and then use these clues to find a possibility. Unfortunately, when Song Yifei's dinner was ready, Gohan still did not find any clues. Let's eat first. Only when we have strength can we get to the next thing. Song Yifei, who had readjusted her emotions, appeared beside Gohan with a table full of delicacies. This time, Gohan did not refuse. Song Yifei finally got her wish of letting Gohan taste her cooking. She stared nervously at Gohan's face, wanting to see Gohan's expression clearly. She wanted to see how he would react to the delicacies she had painstakingly made. After eating 2 mouthfuls of rice, Gohan suddenly put down his chopstick. This made Song Yifei feel uncomfortable. Was her cooking that bad? Was it not compatible with his cold appetite? Qin Pin, Gu Yun, come out for dinner. Gohan shouted towards the bedroom, and Qin Qiu and the others rushed out like hungry ghosts. They all grabbed the advantageous position next to the table and swept the entire table like a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds. Delicious! Delicious! It's so delicious! Compared to Gohan's stinginess, Qin Pin did not cherish her compliments. She coaxed Song Yifei and brought out the stew that had been prepared for Qin Pin in the kitchen. What Song Yifei did not know was that in the mouth of Qin Pin, who had been starving for 2 days, everything that could be eaten was delicious. Gohan, Qin Pin, Gu Yun, Etian, Zhizi. When everyone sat at the table and ate happily, Song Yifei suddenly felt a strong sense of satisfaction. In her eyes, although she was the mistress of the family, Gohan was naturally the male master of the family. Therefore, Qin Pin and the others were naturally the children of the family. Song Yifei enjoyed this feeling very much. She only hoped that time could stop here for a little longer. But damn it, an ungrateful knocking sounded at the door again. Who is it? Can't you let me eat? When Song Yifei opened the door angrily again, she could not finish her words. Because the person standing outside the door was not an ordinary person, but the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit who was smiling awkwardly. Yifei, I haven't seen you for a long time, and your temper has grown. The Tiger Roar Sword Spirit's words made Song Yifei want to find a hole and hide in it. She quickly pulled the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit to the table and asked him to eat. However, the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit waved his hand and said, I came here after eating. I have something important to talk to Gohan about. You guys eat first. Gohan did not say anything, but he quickly put down the bowl and chopsticks to show his attitude. The Tiger Roar Sword Spirit immediately followed Gohan into the small room and slammed the door shut, leaving Song Yifei alone with a sad expression on his face. Dean Tiger Roar, are you looking for me because of Kurakin? Before the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit could speak, Gohan said what was on the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit's mind. Indeed, nothing can be hidden from you. That's right, I'm here because of Kurakin. The Tiger Roar Sword Spirit heaved a long sigh. It's been 2 days. I've been contacting the Yanjing City Sword Committee for the past 2 days, trying to meet Julvren, but they're unwilling. I have no choice but to discuss it with you. I'm just a pawn, what good ideas can I have? Gohan did not even believe what he said. He simply did not want to care about Kurakin. He was not the Virgin Mary. Jules Verne coordinated the departure of the King of Yu, Go Jianjian. The fact that Gohan did not kill Kurakin and used the sword Maiden grafting technique was already Gohan's leniency. Gohan, stop pretending. The chairman told me before we left. He said that in the whole of Yuzhong City, you are the one with the most wicked ideas. If I encounter any difficulties, I will definitely come to you to discuss it. I really have no other way. Otherwise, as the Dean of Yuzhong Academy, I would be too embarrassed to come to you to discuss it. The Tiger Roar Sword Spirit had put it this way. If Gohan continued to refuse, he would not be able to face the world anymore. What reason does Yanjing City have to stop us from seeing Kurakin? Gohan frowned. Actually, at the end of the day, Zhu Luren's mistake was merely to disobey Sword Immortal Tianhen and forcefully clash with the King of Yu, Go Jian. Although this is a mistake, it is not a big one. What's more, Yanjing City's Sword Pavilion has already violated the unspoken rules between the Sword Pavilions. If they really wanted to discuss it face to face, Yanjing City would be the one to lose face. And even if we are the ones at fault, as long as we follow the normal procedures, Yanjing City would not be able to refuse our visit. At this point, Gohan looked at the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit suspiciously. Sir Dean, you are not going to soften in front of the Yanjing City Sword Committee, are you? Did you not even say a single word? Of course I did. I almost got into a fight with them in front of the Sword Committee. The Tiger Roar Sword Spirit smiled even more bitterly, but they did not use the reason you just said to refuse me. They said that Kurakin colluded with Yuan Ko and brought Yuan Ko into Yanjing City. They even cooperated with Yuan Ko to launch a sneak attack on Yanjing City's Sword Pavilion's Lord, Sword Immortal Tianhen, and almost seriously injured Sword Immortal Tianhen. They said that Kurakin has committed a heinous crime, and before the official trial, no one is allowed to see him. At this point, the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit slapped his thigh anxiously. I just don't understand. If Kurakin really brought Yuan Ko into Yanjing City, then the dozen or so inspection systems and the hundreds of Yuan Ko scanners along the way are all deafening. Are they broken? No matter how they lie, they don't even have a draft. Yuan Ko. Gohan recalled the sudden turn of events in the Sword Pavilion. With just a few beams of light, the little lowly who called Kurakin Daddy had actually petrified Sword Immortal Tianhen. It was also because of this petrification that fate played a huge joke on Gohan, forcing Gohan to stay by his side for more than 40 hours without rest. Only then did he think that he could keep the King of Yu by his side and find a way to deal with it. This powerful petrification ability and the 9 snake-like hair that shot out from the little lowly's head made Gohan think of Medusa, who was deeply entangled with him. In the battle in Yuzhong City, Medusa had self-destructed her godhead and disappeared without a trace. At that time, Gohan thought that Medusa was definitely dead, so he did not pay much attention. Now that he thought about it, Gohan suddenly realized that after Medusa self-destructed, no dimensional vortex appeared. Did this mean that Medusa was indeed not dead? Then, Medusa transformed into a little girl named Sasha and lurked by Kurakin's side in an attempt to launch a fatal sneak attack on humans? Dean, do you know where that little girl named Sasha is being held? Gohan said indifferently. Actually, the crux of the matter is not Kurakin at all. What's really important is that little girl named Sasha. We have to figure out if she is Yuan Ko. It's best if she isn't. Then, they have no reason to keep Comrade Kurakin imprisoned. If she is, then Comrade Kurakin has been bewitched by Yuan Ko. Let him kill that Yuan Ko with his own hands, and the matter will be over. Judging from this line, this is the standard line of a villain. Chapter 741. In the end, Gohan did not intervene in the matter of Kurakin. This was not something that Gohan should take care of. On the contrary, Gohan felt that if he intervened again, it might have the opposite effect. After all, Sword Immortal Tianhen was very displeased with him, and he was the direct victim of this matter. His decision would obviously affect the final result of Ku Rakin. Oh, there is one more thing I have to inform you. When the Sword Spirit Roaring Tiger was about to leave, he suddenly remembered something. I'm afraid that the Yard Assembly, which is scheduled for 3 days later, will be postponed again. What's going on? Gohan was confused. The 8 Academies assembly had clearly been postponed for a month. Why would it be postponed again when it was about to start? I heard that there is a big problem in Shanghai Pass. The Sword Spirit Roaring Tiger said. I heard that among the 12 Zhu-Wus outside Shanghai Pass, 2 of the Zhu-Wu seals are weakening, and they may break through the seals if they are not careful. Therefore, Haotian Jiendi took the initiative to invite Longshu Jiendi to reinforce the seal of Shanghai Pass. Longshu Jiendi is tied up by the affairs in London, so he will have to wait for more than 10 days before he can come. If Longshu Jiendi wants to come, then come. What does it have to do with the 8 Academies assembly? Gohan pursed his lips. He obviously had a very bad impression of Longshu Jiendi. I heard that Longshu Jiendi took the initiative to ask to see the strength of the younger generation of the 8 base cities, so the Sword Committee decided to postpone the start of the 8 Academies assembly until Longshu Jiendi arrives. The Sword Spirit Roaring Tiger also looked somewhat disdainful. However, the Sword Spirit Roaring Tiger and Gohan were disdainful for different reasons. Gohan was disdainful because of Longshu Jiendi's shameless act of snatching the Xianyuan sword. As for the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit, it was because Longshu Jiendi had slacked off during the most critical time of Yuzhong City. Hao Tian Jiendi, who was being attacked by 2 desolate grade Yuan Ko at the same time, rushed to Fort Yuyang at the most dangerous moment to cover the humans' retreat. But Longshu Jiendi was said to have just wandered around the Pacific Ocean, had a cup of tea with Jehovah, and then returned home. All right then. How could we dare to go against Jiendi's will? Let's wait for a few days. I also want to see Longshu Jiendi with my own eyes. Gohan laughed. Dean, there is something I want to ask you. What is it? As long as I know, I will tell you. The Tiger Roar Sword Spirit said with a smile. Forget it, it's the same whether I ask or not. Gohan originally wanted to ask the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit about the body of the Sword Lady, but after thinking about it, he gave up. The Tiger Roar Sword Spirit probably didn't know as much as he did. In the following time, Gohan continued to look for clues on the body of the Sword Lady on the internet. Although he found some possibilities one after another, when he thought about it carefully, it was not the case at all. Gohan worked hard all night but still found nothing. The next morning, when the exhausted Gohan was about to go to bed and rest for a while, someone knocked on the door of Song Yifei's house. But this time, it was not an outsider, but Gohan's precious apprentice, Lu Shihua. Since Gohan quit the game, Lu Shihua had not been at Song Yifei's house for most of the day, and he didn't know where she had gone. Master, you finally quit the game. I thought you were still in the game. Seeing Gohan appear in front of her, a happy smile finally appeared on Lu Shihua's face, which was full of pain and exhaustion. Then, the master and apprentice talked for a while, and Gohan finally understood the reason for Lu Shihua's disappearance. It turned out that she was called by Lu Lei to attend a meeting at the Sword Committee headquarters. As the master of Yuzhong City's Sword Garret and the most powerful person in Yanjing City, Lu Shihua was naturally qualified to attend the daily meeting of the Sword Committee headquarters. Originally, Lu Shihua could also not attend this regular meeting, because this was usually the responsibility of a permanent representative of Yuzhong City sent to the Sword Committee headquarters. However, Lu Lei forced Lu Shihua to attend this regular meeting in the name of training her, so Lu Shihua had no choice but to agree. After all, she was Lu Lei's apprentice. One could imagine how painful it was for Lu Shihua to attend such a regular meeting. because among the participants of the entire regular meeting, except for the secretaries who were responsible for taking notes, the rest were all sword holders. Among them, the representatives of each base city were all sword holders at the spirit sword level. As an ordinary person, Lu Shihua had to endure how many supercilious looks, how much contempt, how much indifference, and how much disdain. Everyone could imagine it. In this case, Lu Shihua's not emotional collapse was already a manifestation of her strong heart. Grandmaster is doing this for your own good. When you can face this calmly, even if you are just an ordinary person, you will also be a real master of the sword garret. Guhan touched Lu Shihua's head and said. Lu Shihua closed her eyes comfortably. Master, you told me that as long as I go to Yanjing City, I can become a sword holder. Why don't you fulfill your promise? Lu Shihua, who closed her eyes and enjoyed the moment, suddenly said. Wait, you saw what happened with Ku Rakin. Now Yanjing City's sword garret and we are like fire and water. If you go to coordinate with the double-winged angel sword now, you will only be humiliated by them. When I find a suitable opportunity, I will take you to coordinate with them, Guhan said. Master, you have the final say. I have no objection. Lu Shihua smiled. Indeed, she didn't care much about the matter of being a sword holder. What did you talk about in the regular meeting? Guhan suddenly became curious. The regular meeting of the Sword Committee was like the standing committee meeting of the Politburo before the apocalypse. Everyone in China was full of curiosity about this meeting and wanted to know how it was going to be carried out. It's just some boring things. They just need to report what happened in their base cities and then complain to the headquarters of the Sword Committee, hoping that the headquarters of the Sword Committee can allocate some resources or send some sword bearers to help them. Lu Shihua stuck out her tongue. Obviously, she had no interest in this meeting. She didn't even care about the content of the meeting. She only remembered to tell Guhan, You must be tired. Go and rest. I also need to sleep. Guhan waved his hand, indicating that Lu Shihua could leave. Oh, by the way, Master, something big happened in Yuzhang City. I just received the news from the meeting. Lu Shihua suddenly patted her head and said, What big thing? Could it be that those old guys from Mount D are up to something again? Guhan asked. No, it's a problem with a sword forger who was locked up in prison. Lu Shihua tried hard to recall. It seems that the Sword Committee carried out some secret plan on him. In the end, the sword forger messed up and destroyed the soul of a broken natural sword Maiden that was sent for an experiment. It was said that the broken natural sword Maiden could no longer be repaired. The old guys in the Sword Committee were so angry that they wanted to kill the sword forger. Anyway, the meeting was a mess. Now that I think about it, that natural sword Maiden was too pitiful. She fought for humans for so long, but because of some strange experiment, her soul was completely destroyed. Lu Shihua's words were full of pity, but in fact, she didn't care much about this matter. A natural sword Maiden was gone. What did it have to do with her? However, Lu Shihua's words caused a huge wave to rise in Guhan's heart. It was really like handing a pillow when one wanted to doze off. Guhan had just been worried about King Yu's sword ladybody, and now the sword ladybody had been handed to Guhan. However, Guhan felt that something was wrong. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? Perhaps I Ching had already planned everything behind the scenes. Fortunately, I Ching was Guhan's wife. Otherwise, if Guhan was treated as an enemy by someone like I Ching who could predict the future, then Guhan might really be sold by someone else and still count the money for them. What other news? It was about the broken natural sword Maiden. Shihua, what else did you find out? Guhan asked hurriedly. There's nothing else. However, the Sword Committee has decided to send people to supervise the burial of the unlucky natural sword Maiden. They will melt her and let her return to the earth. After that, no one is allowed to mention this matter again. Lu Shihua shrugged. I suddenly feel that humans are hopeless. They caused the death of a natural sword maiden, and all they think about is how to hide it. They don't even have the courage to take responsibility. I despise them. When will the people they sent to supervise set off? Guhan clenched his fists. It seems like they'll set off tomorrow because the armored levitating train will return to Yuzhong City with the goods tomorrow. They'll be going back with them. I understand. Good disciple, go and rest. Master still has something to do. After Guhan sent Lu Shihua, who felt that something was wrong, out, he immediately put on his helmet and entered the game again. The place where Guhan logged in was still King Yu's room. Usually, when Guhan went online, King Yu would stay in his room and wait. Sometimes, he would even sleep naked on the bed, tempting Guhan to do it on the spot. However, the room was empty now, not even King Yu's shadow could be seen. King Yu, come out, Guhan said to the empty room as if he was singing a one-man show. What's wrong? You're in a hurry. I don't have the ability to serve that thing of yours right now. King Yu's voice sounded in the room as if she was standing somewhere in the room, but he couldn't see her figure. Our chance is here. Guhan walked to the bed excitedly and said to the window, Your body of the sword maiden has appeared. I will definitely free you from this damned soul state. Chapter 742. After coming out of the rise from the ground dungeon, King Yu was in a very strange state. After returning to the game world, King Yu's physical body disappeared, leaving only his soul around Guhan. Not only did the sword maiden's physical body disappear, even King Yu's sword form disappeared. King Yu was truly only left with a soul in the game. Guhan could only guess that when King Yu's soul left his physical body and flew into the Avicii sword, his physical body had already been destroyed in the dungeon. However, why did his physical body also disappear in the game world? This confused Guhan. Could it be that what happened in the dungeon could affect the game world? King Yu, there's another question I don't understand. That is, how should I bring your soul into the real world? Guhan said to the empty air. I remember Qing saying that the answer to all questions can be found in the furnace of heaven and earth. So, King Yu, I want to ask you, can you find a way to leave the game while fusing with the Avicii sword in the furnace of heaven and earth? How could there be a way to leave the game during that process? I was only guided by I Ching's soul into the Avicii sword's body. Without I Ching's help, my soul would have been destroyed on the spot. King Yu said. Wait, you entered the Avicii sword under Qing's guidance. Guhan's eyes lit up. Then can you enter the real world under the guidance of the other sword maidens? How is that possible? I didn't go offline and fuse with the Avicii sword. Moreover, the other sword maidens didn't destroy their original bodies and exist in soul form. How can these two things be confused? King Yu said disdainfully. No, who said that the other sword maidens didn't go offline in soul form? They entered the game in the form of a soul, and then left the game in the form of a soul. This is actually the same as fusing with a sword maiden. Guhan clapped his hands. King Yu, wait a moment. I'll call the other sword maidens. With that, Guhan went offline. Not long after, Gu Yun, Yi Tian, and Juzi unwillingly went online. Gu Yun, you go first. Guhan explained the matter to Gu Yun in detail. Gu Yun was at a loss as she blinked her eyes and asked Guhan, Brother, I know how to go offline, but I don't know how to go offline with Big Sister King Yu. What should I do? I remember that Big Sister I Ching and my soul seemed to be connected by chains. She used her mind to touch me, and then my soul maintained a completely relaxed state. The two of us were connected. King Yu replied in a low voice without any confidence. It was obvious that she was also in a half-dazed state. Then let's try King Yu's method first. King Yu, stand in front of Little Yun. Then, Little Yun, try to use your divine sense to see if you can feel King Yu's soul. Guhan decided to try everything he could. Gu Yun obediently nodded, closed her eyes, and tried to sense King Yu's soul. Although this was a very serious matter, Gu Yun's expression looked like she was sitting on a toilet bowl, constipated for a few days, and couldn't poop even though she was trying her best. "I feel it! I feel it!" Suddenly, Gu Yun cried out excitedly, "Big Sister King Yu, did my will touch your soul? You touched my finger!" With a smirk on his face, Yi Tian tapped Gu Yun's forehead forcefully. Gu Yun's forehead had just touched Yi Tian's finger. "Stop messing around, it's your turn now," Gohan scolded. Yi Tian stuck out his tongue. "No, I won't do such a stupid thing. It's like I've been constipated for 5 days and 5 nights. That's too stupid." Yi Tian, who didn't get along with Gohan, suddenly started to make a fuss again. He shouted and shouted, not willing to do as Gohan said no matter what. "Who is it? Who touched me?" Just as Gohan was about to teach Yi Tian a lesson, King Yu's soul suddenly cried out strangely. "What's going on? King Yu, what's wrong?" Gohan hurriedly asked. "Just now, something touched me. It felt the same as in the dungeon. Just now, a soul did touch my soul. There's no mistake," King Yu shouted excitedly. At this point, Juzi, who had been silent all this while, suddenly started to shine with starlight. The starlight started from Juzi's forehead and slowly extended forward. Then, the starlight seemed to have hit something. The top began to split into countless thin lines, drawing an outline in the air, and finally formed the appearance of a young girl. This was not the appearance of a normal girl. To be more precise, she looked like a drawing, a pencil sketch. If one looked closely, this drawing was clearly King Yu's appearance. "Big Sister King Yu, when did you go to the 2D world?" Seeing the sketch of King Yu, Gu Yun chuckled and said mischievously, "You're just 2D. Your whole family is 2D. King Yu scolded Gu Yun in displeasure. "Big brother, your King Yu scolded you for coming from the 2D world. If you want to teach her a lesson, you might as well ignore her and sell her." Gu Yun immediately started to sow discord. "Alright, stop messing around. This world is a 2D world to begin with." Gohan patted Gu Yun's head, then looked at the sketch of King Yu with a scrutinizing gaze. "King Yu, is your soul connection successful?" "I think so," King Yu said uncertainly. Then, she looked at Juzi, as if asking for Juzi's opinion. "I don't know," Juzi said expressionlessly. It seemed like she really didn't know. "Juzi, log off immediately." Gohan first said this to Juzi, then said to King Yu, "When Juzi logs off, King Yu, you must pay attention to the changes in your soul. If Juzi's soul makes any requests, you must be absolutely obedient and absolutely relaxed." "Got it," King Yu nodded. In the next second, Juzi's body disappeared from the game, and the sketch of King Yu in the air also disappeared. "King Yu, are you still there?" Gohan asked loudly, but he didn't get any reply. No reply was a good thing. Gohan didn't even have time to smile before he went offline with Gu Yun and Yi Tian. Yanjing City's core area, 87, Jiefeng Road, Room 401, Building 4. Gohan looked at the somewhat old envelope in his hand. At the same time, he kept comparing the map of Yanjing City, but he couldn't find Jiefeng Road written on the address. Gohan subconsciously touched the green jade ring on his finger. He didn't know if everyone remembered the origin of this ring. This was the ring that Gohan obtained from I Ching in the Heroes Start from Insignificance dungeon. What made Gohan feel strange and terrifying was that after returning to the real world, this green jade ring was actually sent from Yanjing City to Gohan. It was as if someone had seen through Gohan's experience. This envelope was the one that was sent to Gohan with the green jade ring. Yanjing City's core area, 87, Jiefeng Road, Room 401, Building 4 was also the address written on this envelope. At that time, Gohan didn't throw the envelope away. Instead, he hid it in his dimensional pocket. As expected, it came in handy at this time. In order to allow King Yu to be reborn in the game, he had to restart the worldly furnace. The amount of sovereign blood required to restart the worldly furnace was not something that Gohan could obtain in a short period of time. However, I Ching seemed to have prepared for this. She had prepared an IOU for Gohan, allowing Gohan to obtain at least 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood with the IOU. Although he didn't know if I Ching was telling the truth, finding the IOU was something that Gohan had to do. This was what I Ching had told Gohan. Ching has already told you the address of the IOU. You just need to go get it yourself. Gohan could guarantee that I Ching had never told him the address of the IOU in the Rise from the Ground dungeon. At that time, Gohan had wanted to ask I Ching about it. However, he suddenly recalled the green jade ring and the address written on the envelope containing the green jade ring. If there was an address that I Ching had told Gohan, it would only be this one. Therefore, Gohan made a prompt decision and bought a detailed map of Beijing City. He began to search around the entire core area of Beijing City in an attempt to find the street known as Liberation Road. The first thing Gohan did was to see if the words Liberation Road were written on the map. However, it was a pity that there were countless road names on the map, but the words Liberation Road were nowhere to be found. Of course, this was also within Gohan's expectations. This address could be an address from 700 years ago. The entire Yanjing city had gone through more than a dozen traffic reconstructions. The city planning had long been a world of difference from 700 years ago. It was difficult for the name of Liberation Road to continue. To give a simple example, who among the readers knew about the Ming dynasty? What was the name of the street in the city that he was in? Even if the name of the street had lasted for 700 years, there was no guarantee that this Liberation Road was the Liberation Road from 700 years ago. It was possible that the distance between the two was a few hundred kilometers. It seems that I have to find a way to find a map of Beijing City from 700 years ago to figure out the exact location of Liberation Road. Gohan stuffed the map in his hand into his dimensional pocket and muttered to himself. However, it was easier said than done to find a map of Beijing City from 700 years ago. 700 years ago, the human network system had not yet been established. The recording and storage of information could only rely on traditional paper media. Therefore, it was impossible to find a map of Beijing City from 700 years ago on the internet. Gohan also tried to get Lu Shihua to use his identity as the head of the Sword Garret in Yuzhong City to search for information in the Central Secret Database. But what was frustrating was that the map of Yanjing City was not classified information at all, so there was no relevant information about Yanjing City in the database. There might be such a map in Yanjing's own database, but unfortunately, Lu Shihua's identity as the head of the Yuzhong Sword Garret was not as useful as an ordinary person in Yanjing in front of Yanjing's database. He was not even allowed to enter Yanjing's database. Fortunately, the map came to him on its own. Chapter 743. Zhou Qingquan, someone is looking for you. Zhou Qingquan saw his colleague looking at him mockingly, and he knew that something bad was about to happen. He didn't know if it was because of Zhou Qingquan's harmless appearance, but ever since he entered the Ministry of Transport, almost all the bad luck in the ministry was handed over to him. Everyone was used to letting Zhou Qingquan take the blame. If it wasn't for the fact that this was a job that everyone envied, Zhou Qingquan might have resigned already. Brother Wang, can you tell me what good thing is coming to me? Zhou Qingquan forced a smile and asked his colleague. How would I know if you ask me? Brother Wang chuckled. This person is now in the living room. Originally, he came directly to the minister, but seeing the minister's bad luck, he threw this matter to you without even meeting him. You should be more tolerant. Why don't you take responsibility for this? Zhou Qingquan cursed in his heart. However, Zhou Qingquan was still very curious. Who could make the minister so bad luck that he didn't even want to meet him? Zhou Qingquan rushed to the living room anxiously. As soon as he saw the person sitting on the sofa, Zhou Qingquan suddenly realized that it was this big boss. No wonder the minister didn't even want to meet him. This kind of big boss with a sword was the most difficult to serve. As the minister dealing with this kind of thing was just asking to be humiliated. Sir Gohan, didn't I tell you that you have 3 days? You don't have to be in such a hurry. Zhou Qingquan quickly put a cup of fragrant tea in front of Gohan and said with a smile. It was hard to imagine that this was a civil servant of the Ministry of Transport. Under normal circumstances, which civil servant of the Ministry of Transport didn't have a good expression on their face, and their mouth didn't have a good word. They would try to delay the whole process, and if they could delay it for 4 days, they wouldn't delay it for 3 days. It was rare to see a civil servant like this who came to deliver tea with a smile. Those who didn't know the situation would think that this person had something on the Ministry of Transport. They wouldn't have thought that Gohan was a criminal suspect in a serious speeding case. May I know why Mr. Gohan is here? Zhou Qingquan asked carefully. You must be joking. Didn't you ask me to come? I should be the one asking you what you want me to do. Gohan looked at Zhou Qingquan in confusion. Slap. If he wasn't facing Gohan, Zhou Qingquan would have slapped himself. He seriously wondered if his brain was filled with shit. That was why he was possessed by a ghost and asked Gohan why he was here. I'm sorry, I didn't sleep well last night. Zhou Qingquan was telling the truth. He really didn't sleep well last night. The thing is, did you drive a Yan Huang 3008 Super Maglev sports car from Yanjing City's 5th Ring Road to the core area between 6:30 p.m. and 6:55 p.m. on October 21st? Zhou Qingquan asked worriedly. He was worried that what if Gohan refused to admit it? What if he quarreled with her and left the Ministry of Transport? What if the minister forced him to take responsibility for this matter? Zhou Qingquan's mind was filled with countless conjectures, and every conjecture ended with his own unfortunate figure. That's right. That person was me. Gohan's answer made Zhou Qingquan let out a long sigh of relief. Since the other party had voluntarily admitted it, this matter could be considered half settled. Then, Sir Gohan, can you cooperate with us and accept a simple punishment? Speaking up to this point, Zhou Qingquan's heart was in his throat again. He was afraid that Gohan would refuse to accept any punishment. No problem. I did indeed race on the street. The mistake was made by me, and I should accept the punishment. Gohan smiled and nodded. This made Zhou Qingquan feel more at ease. Please take a look. Are these conditions okay? Do you have any objections? Zhou Qingquan carefully handed a document to Gohan. This document simply listed the punishment that Gohan would receive. Sir, please take a look. If you feel that there's anything wrong with it, or if the amount is too high, we can amend it at any time. We can change it at any time, and we can discuss it well. Zhou Qingquan's words had completely embarrassed the government. Since when was it easy to discuss the fines of the traffic department? Was there such a government in this world? Gohan looked at the punishment on the document and was shocked. It was not that the conditions of the punishment were too high, but too low. It was so low that Gohan felt a little embarrassed. First of all, this document did not have any detention type of punishment. It only required Gohan to sign an apology and pay a fine of 10,000 renminbi. This matter would end just like that. For a sword wielder, what kind of punishment was 10,000 renminbi? It was just the money for a meal. This 10,000 renminbi was probably only an administrative fine. Gohan had damaged a lot of public property on the way here, so it was reasonable to say that he should also pay a lot of money. However, the punishment notice did not mention a word about this punishment. Obviously, this loss was silently borne by the traffic department themselves. Zhou Qingquan carefully observed Gohan's expression. He was afraid that the other party was dissatisfied with the punishment conditions of the traffic department. according to the method that the department head had instructed him yesterday, as long as the other party was willing to admit his mistake and pay a small fine, this matter would be considered over. Even the yen huang 3008 that caused the accident could be returned to the other party. Speaking of the yen huang 3008, Zhou Qingquan felt a headache coming on. The yen huang 3008 had crashed through many checkpoints along the way, destroying many police cars and buses. It had also suffered heavy injuries, and the entire roof had been torn off. In order to resolve this matter as soon as possible, the traffic department even used their own money to repair the yen huang 3008. The total repair cost was more than 10 million renminbi, which was 1,000 times the amount of the fine. Unlike before the apocalypse, when every department had their own private coffers, at this time, the budgets of all the government departments were in the hands of the highest level AI. Every department expenditure had to go through the approval of the highest level AI. Therefore, this 10 million renminbi repair cost could not be paid with the public funds of the traffic department. Zhou Qingquan heard that from next month onwards, all the civil servants of the traffic department would be deducted 1,000 renminbi from their salaries, until the 10 million renminbi was made up. Inside and outside of the Yanjing city's traffic department, there were only about 1,000 people. This would take a full 10 months to make up for it. This 1,000 renminbi might not be much to the big shots, but for Zhou Qingquan, who did not earn much in the first place, it almost made him cry blood. Not good. Not good. Gohan threw the punishment document on the table and said while shaking his head. Hearing Gohan say this, Zhou Qingquan was so anxious that he was about to cry. Sir Gohan, if you think the fine is too high, we can discuss it again. Otherwise, you can just pay 5,000 renminbi. Sir, you have to understand us. The council has been forcing us to give a result, and we dare not take a single cent from you. Hey! This is not a matter of money. Gohan shook his head. Zhou Qingquan was stunned for a moment, and suddenly had a look of realization. This Gohan definitely did not want to sign the letter of apology. For a sword-bearer, what was 10,000 renminbi? The most important thing was his own face. Signing the letter of apology was equivalent to losing a lot of face. This sword-bearer, who had once been the master of the Yuzhang Sword Pavilion, definitely did not want to lose face. If possible, Zhou Qingquan did not want this stupid letter of apology. It was not like he could eat it, but there was no other way. The sword-bearer wanted face, and so did the council. Without this letter of apology, the council and the Ministry of Transport would all be embarrassed, and this matter would not be resolved. Zhou Qingquan had no choice but to plead with Gohan again and persuade him to sign the letter of apology. Gohan has grown up, and the Ministry of Transport is really in trouble. The council is in charge, and the people are complaining. Our Weibo has tens of thousands of comments every day, saying that the Ministry of Transport only cares about fines and doesn't care about traffic. How would they know the pain of the Ministry of Transport? Every one of us is living like a dog. Zhou Qingquan began to make a long speech. As he spoke, a few drops of tears flowed from the corner of his eyes. Everything had been fine, but now it had become a complaining session. You don't have to say any more. Let me ask you, after I sign this letter of apology, what will you do with it? Will it be made public? Gohan asked, interrupting Zhou Qingquan's tearful complaint. No. Absolutely not. Zhou Qingquan immediately patted his chest and promised, "This is what we will use to explain to the higher-ups. We promise that it will never be made public. I dare to guarantee with my job and personal dignity that this is just used to fool the higher-ups." I see. It seems that I can't sign this letter of apology, Gohan said resolutely. In an instant, Zhou Qingquan was speechless, and he was completely stunned. Zhou Qingquan's eyes had lost all the light, and there was only darkness left, as if the whole world had collapsed. I'd better resign and go home to sell sweet potatoes. Zhou Qingquan thought silently, and was ready to get up and leave. If this letter of apology is not made public, how can I express my apology? How can I reflect the dignity of the law? How can I learn from past mistakes and deter people who want to race in Yanjing City in the future? Guhan said righteously, and Zhou Qingquan, who was just about to stand up and leave, was so scared that he sat back down again. What is this situation? What does this sword-bearer Guhan want to say? Why don't I seem to understand a word? Before Zhou Qingquan could figure out what happened, he heard Guhan say again, "This letter of apology must not be made public. It must be published and let everyone see it. Only then can it serve as a warning to future generations. So, I decided that I will publish an apology letter on the internet, newspapers, and TV, expressing my apology for the racing incident and warning the future generations to never make this kind of mistake like me." Section Chief Zhou, do you think I can deal with it this way? After that, Guhan looked at Zhou Qingquan with a smile and asked. Yes, yes. Zhou Qingquan could really do it this time. Chapter 744. There's also the issue of the fine. The amount is too little. How can 10,000 be enough? I think it should be at least 1 million renminbi. Otherwise, how can we learn from past mistakes to avoid future mistakes? Guhan looked at the punishment document and said, Yes. Yes. Zhou Qingquan, who was still in a state of confusion, could only reply in a low voice. There's also the issue of compensation for damage to public facilities. Why isn't it written on this list? I remember that I hit and damaged 32 maglev police cars, 46 maglev buses, 120 street lamps, and some other things that I can't remember. How much do I have to pay? Yes, yes. Since you don't have the statistics, I'll give you a number. I think it's 10 million yuan. Do you think it's enough for the compensation? Guhan waved his hand, and 10 million yuan was sent out. Yes, yes, and my Yan Huang 3008 Super Maglev flying car. That's the car that caused the accident. How can you give it back to me? They should detain that Super Hover flying car in the Ministry of Transportation forever. In the future, when there's a Spectrum Technique Publicity Week, Traffic Safety Week, we can bring this car out for display during the Public Travel Week to warn those who intend to break the law. We can tell them that Yanjing City does not allow car racing, and violators will have their tools confiscated. Section Chief Zhou, do you think this is okay? Yes, yes. Zhou Qingquan was still immersed in his yes world until Guhan shook his body and handed a new revised traffic accident handling opinion to Zhou Qingquan. Zhou Qingquan woke up from his own world. Section Chief Zhou, please see if you can handle it according to the suggestions in this letter. Zhou Qingquan received the new letter in a daze. He almost jumped out of his chair after reading it. When he finished reading the entire letter, he was so excited that he couldn't even speak. After the revision, the traffic proposal was completely different from the original one. Not only did Guhan have to publish a letter of apology on the internet, newspapers, and television, he also had to pay a 1 million RMB administrative fine and 10 million RMB compensation for the damage to public property. He also had to leave a large number of Yan Huang 3008 in the Ministry of Transport as a warning to future generations. What else could Zhou Qingquan say when he saw such a resolution? This made the Ministry of Transport, which had been prepared to swallow this huge loss, suddenly turn around. Not only did they gain face, but they also received an additional income of nearly 80 million yuan for no reason. If the old minister who resigned a few days ago knew that things would turn out like this, he would probably vomit blood and die at home. For Zhou Qingquan, if this letter was really finalized, then he, Zhou Qingquan, would become the first hero of the Ministry of Transportation. His status in the Ministry of Transportation would instantly rise. Everyone had to remember Zhou Qingquan's kindness. Even the head of the Ministry of Transportation owed Zhou Qingquan. In the assessment that would take place a few months later, his position would definitely be moved up. But was there really such a good thing in the world? Zhou Qingquan couldn't believe it. Lord Gohan, is what you wrote in this letter true? If there's no problem, I'll hand it over to our minister to make a new decision, Zhou Qingquan said urgently. He couldn't wait to take the written opinion away to prevent Gohan from going back on his word. Wait! Gohan pressed his hand on the written opinion and said with a smile, Actually, I have a small favor that I hope Chief Zhou can help me with. Sure enough, there was no free lunch in this world. This Gohan really wanted him to do something to make a deal. But what exactly did Gohan want him to do? Would it be a crime that would endanger the entire Ministry of Transportation? Or a conspiracy that was very dangerous and might even put his future and life on the line? Thinking of this, Zhou Qingquan was completely at a loss. He didn't know if he should agree to the deal with the Devil Gohan. It's not a difficult thing. I like to collect some old map. This time I came to Yanjing City. I want to collect all the city maps of Yanjing City since its founding. But you also know that I'm from Yuzhong City. Your Yanjing City sword-bearer doesn't seem to think highly of me and is unwilling to fulfill my small wish. There's no other way. I can only ask Chief Zhou to help me with this small favor. I guarantee that as long as Section Chief Zhou can help me get a map of Yanjing City that has been mapped and revised every year since the founding of Yanjing City, I will sign this letter of settlement and guarantee that it will be completed without any discount. I can post the letter of apology on the internet in front of you and send it to the newspapers and television stations. All the money as compensation will also be paid in full without delay. Gohan's request made Zhou Qingquan fall into silence. It wasn't that he thought Gohan's conditions were too much. On the contrary, Gohan's conditions were too small. It was so small that Zhou Qingquan felt a little guilty. It would be extremely difficult for others to get their hands on these maps of Yanjing City. But for the staff of the Ministry of Transportation, it couldn't be any easier. The information wasn't even classified, so it was impossible for it to cause any harm to Yanjing City. Therefore, these maps were all stored in the Ministry of Transportation's public server. Any member of the Ministry of Transportation could freely download them without any problems. Zhou Qing felt that he was silent because he couldn't figure out if Gohan's words were true or not. Was he really just doing this for his own desire to collect? Zhou Qingquan was afraid that Gohan's deal had some malicious intentions. Wasn't this how it was portrayed on TV? A seemingly insignificant piece of information could cause a major change in the entire world. If things went wrong, Zhou Qingquan might even become a sinner in history. F***ck. What does being a sinner in history have to do with me? I can't even keep my rice bowl. Why would I care about being a sinner in history? Zhou Qingquan made up his mind and nodded at Gohan. No problem, Sir Gohan, please wait here for a moment. I will copy all the information over now. Thank you. Gohan's lips curled up slightly. A few hours later, an apology letter signed by Gohan was posted on some platforms. However, these apology letters were only posted in some inconspicuous corners, such as in the middle of a newspaper advertisement, on the bottom of a TV station's screen, or in an ordinary thread on an online forum. Therefore, this apology letter didn't cause any waves. No one knew that the previous head of the Sword Tower in Yuzhong City had actually posted such an apology letter. It wasn't until many years later, when Gohan's fame spread all over the world, that this apology letter was unearthed by a tabloid reporter and made public, causing an uproar. Everyone who saw this apology letter praised Gohan as a man of noble character, a man who dared to admit his mistakes, and the greatest person of this era. As a result, this apology letter that originally admitted his mistakes became a heroic deed of Gohan to prove his noble character. Things in the world were just that ridiculous. Zhou Qingquan indeed benefited from this misfortune. He was promoted one rank. Later, it was said that his luck was off the charts and his career was incomparably successful. In the end, he became a standing member of the Yanjing City Council and a great figure in Yanjing City. There was a special mapping department in Yanjing City's Ministry of Transportation. Every year, they would draw a map of Yanjing City and save it. This precious information fell into Gohan's hands so easily. Starting from the year 2068, when Yanjing City was founded, the map of Yanjing City was in Gohan's hands every year. Through these maps, Gohan could see the vicissitudes and changes of Yanjing City in the past 1,000 years, as well as the huge development. Gohan started his search from the year I Ching ascended to the throne, and sure enough, he found a road called Liberation Road in the core area of Yanjing City. But just 10 years later, the core area of Yanjing City changed its name, and the original name of Liberation Road was changed to another road a few kilometers away. Just 2 years later, the name of the road changed again, and it became another road that was quite a distance away. After that, the location of Liberation Road never changed again. It was not until more than 60 years later that Liberation Road was completely removed. From then on, there was no road named Liberation Road in Yanjing City. Therefore, it was obvious that the Liberation Road Gohan was looking for was definitely one of the 3 Liberation Road. Then the question became, which one was the true path to liberation? Gohan's first goal was to temporarily set the last path of liberation. The reason was very simple. During the time I Ching was alive, the last Liberation Road had existed for the longest time, a full 60 years, so the possibility of the last Liberation Road was naturally the highest. Compared to the current map, the last Liberation Road corresponded to a road called Hongru Road. From the name, it was obvious that this road was named after Hongru Jiandi. This was also the basic rule for naming roads in all cities. Every time a Jiandi was born in their city, they would also choose a road in the core area to be named after this Jiandi to show respect for Jiandi. And if this Jiandi's contribution was great enough that all Jiandi felt ashamed of themselves, then all 8 major cities would have a road named after this Jiandi. For example, Zhejiang Jiandi or Kanzu. The most recent Jiandi to achieve this was Gujin Jiandi. According to the map, 700 years ago, Liberation Road was a small road, and both sides of the road were densely packed with residential buildings. But now, Hongru Road had become a commercial street, and there were all kinds of shops on both sides of the road. After a lot of effort, Gohan finally found the location of number 87 on the old map. However, the original residential building had disappeared, and in its place was a Chanel pork restaurant. Gohan and Chanel were really fated. Chapter 745. Waiter, give me 100 kilograms of red braised meat first. Gohan threw Chinpin, who was sitting in the infant pouch on his chest, onto the table. Before Chinpin could ask for meat, Gohan took the initiative to help Chinpin get 100 kilograms of red braised meat. This time, only Chinpin went out with Gohan. Gu Yun was still sleeping at home. Juzi's situation was very special. She couldn't move and could only stay at home. Etian went out to find wine early in the morning. Gohan didn't want to disturb her mood, so only Chinpin followed Gohan at this time. Chinpin likes Gohan the most. Come, give me a kiss. Chinpin jumped onto Gohan's shoulder from the table and gave a big kiss to Gohan's face. She even licked Gohan's ear with her little tongue, making Gohan's whole body tremble. Chinpin was ignorant, so she didn't know. When Gohan and King Yu carried out some kind of indescribable movement, once King Yu was at a disadvantage, and was tortured by Gohan to the point that he wanted to die, King Yu only needed to lick Gohan's ear desperately. King Yu only needed to lick the solid cold's ear with all his might, and the solid cold's durability would instantly drop by around 3 times. In just a short while, that damn thing would be shot out. King Yu had never failed this move. Don't lick my place in the future. Gohan knocked Chinpin's head hard, then pinched Chinpin's cheek and warned Chinpin with a red face. Okay. I hate Gohan the most. Chinpin and Gohan played for a while, then the first plate of red braised meat was served. Chinpin immediately threw Gohan to the back of his mind and began to gorge himself on his delicacies. Who was Gohan? He couldn't remember. It was around 10 o'clock in the morning, which wasn't mealtime, so the entire Chanel seemed very empty. There were only 2 customers. One was sitting in the west corner eating quietly, and the other was Chinpin, who was wolfing down his food at the table. Gohan casually ate a few mouthfuls of meat and pretended to be bored as he chatted with a waitress standing beside him. It was already quite boring at this time, and Gohan had ordered 100 caddies of pork in one go. It was obvious that he was a rich man. Therefore, this beautiful waitress was happy to chat with Gohan. Soon, Gohan got a lot of information out of her. First of all, this Chanel had a very long history. It was the first branch of the Chanel chain, which was also the second branch. It had a history of more than 280 years, and could be considered one of the 3 oldest shops on the entire street. The turnover of staff in this branch was very fast. There were no more than 2 employees who were older than him, and neither of them had stayed here for more than 5 years. Moreover, this branch had just been renovated 3 years ago, and all the decorations in the shop had been changed. Moreover, in order to reinstall the underground pipes, the entire ground had been excavated. When he heard this, Gohan felt that this shop couldn't be the place where the loan receipt was hidden. First, because there wasn't anyone who stayed here for a long time, so there couldn't be someone who received Jitian Jiandi's order and waited for more than 700 years to send that letter to him. Second, since this shop was so thoroughly renovated, it was obvious that the loan receipt couldn't be hidden in the shop. Otherwise, it would have been discovered long ago, and it wouldn't have fallen into Gohan's hands. After understanding this, Gohan decided to wait for Chinpin to finish his 100 caddies of red braised pork before looking at the other 2 roads. The second Jiefeng Road was the Jiefeng Road that appeared first. This Jiefeng Road had always been called Jiefeng Road before Jitian Jiandi ascended to the throne, so it was obviously the second most suspicious. Contrary to the previous Jiefeng Road, number 87, of Jiefeng Road 700 years ago was a shop, but 700 years later, number 87, of Jiefeng Road had become a residential building. Could the loan receipt be hidden in someone's house? Gohan's heart skipped a beat, and he walked around the building. This residential building had some history. Gohan saw a nameplate by the side of the road. This nameplate was marked with the year 2856, which proved that this building was at least built before 2856. The floor of this building was not high, only about 6 floors. This was impossible outside the core area, because the residential buildings outside the core area had at least 100 stories in order to accommodate more people. Only the residential buildings in the core area were generally not tall, and the highest was no more than 10 stories. The reason for this was that these residential buildings were actually the sword bearers and their families. The sword bearers needed a good living environment, and the higher the floor, the worse the living environment would become. In order to let the sword bearers live as comfortably as possible, the sword bearers' residential buildings in the core area of every base would be limited to less than 10 stories. This was both good and bad for Gohan. The good was that there were fewer residents in the building, so it was naturally easier to search. Otherwise, a residential building with more than 100 stories and more than 400 households would be impossible for Gohan to find a complete residential building even if he searched for 10 days and 10 nights. The bad was naturally that the difficulty of communication would greatly increase. When facing ordinary residents, as long as Gohan revealed his identity as a sword bearer, he believed that no one would dare to refuse Gohan's search. However, it was different for the sword bearers, who would be willing to let an outsider search their home. When faced with Gohan's request, these sword bearers would naturally refuse without hesitation. Therefore, if he wanted to find out which household might have the loan slip, Gohan had to use some clever methods, such as the two old aunties who were enjoying the shade under a small tree in front of the building. "Hello, big sister. May I ask if Mr. Li Gang's family lives here?" Guhan asked the two aunties with a smile. "How can you say that, kid? I'm not a big sister, I'm almost 70 years old." Although the two aunties scolded him, they still didn't know how to speak, but their cheerful smiles deeply betrayed them. Obviously, the words "big sister" were very useful to them. "Young man, who did you say you were looking for? We don't have a neighbor called Li Gang in this building," one of the aunties said with a smile. "Really? I seem to remember that Brother Li said that he lives here. Is it number 87 or number 78? Guhan touched his head honestly and said with a puzzled face, "Of course, there wouldn't be a person named Li Gang here, because this name was just made up by Guhan. Young man, you must have heard the wrong street name. I've lived here all my life, and there is no one named Li Gang on this whole street." One of the aunties patted her drooping chest and said, "Then I'm sorry to bother you sisters." Guhan smiled honestly again and took out two small boxes from his dimensional pocket and handed them to the two aunties and sisters. "These are the two boxes of facial masks I won a few days ago. I don't need them, so I'll give them to you two sisters as an apology." "Yo! How can I accept this? It's even the Weilong brand of facial mask. I heard that a box can be sold for thousands of yuan on the market." The two aunties said they were sorry, but their hands quickly put away the two boxes of facial mask. One of the aunties even looked at the dimensional pocket in Guhan's hand that was shining. But don't get me wrong, these aunties didn't want to steal Guhan's dimensional pocket, but they were interested in Guhan's identity as a sword bearer. "Young man, why are you looking for Li Gang? Why don't you tell us about it?" a middle-aged woman asked curiously. "It's like this. Li Gang is a friend I met a few days ago. He said that he has a sister who is very beautiful and wants to introduce her to me, so I came to look for him." Speaking of this, Guhan's face showed two groups of shy blushes, and he looked like a shy and honest young man. "I was wondering what it was for. It turned out to be a blind date." The two aunties laughed, and one of them took one of Guhan's hands and said with a smile, "Young man, you don't have to see Li Gang? Let me tell you, if there are any outstanding beauties, they would have long been snatched away by others. Why would they introduce you to someone they just met? Young man, listen to me, if you really want to know a girl, Sister Wang will introduce you to her. I, Sister Wang, have lived here since I was born. I know all the girls on this street, and I know each and every one of them. I promise to introduce you to a good girl who is gentle, virtuous, and virtuous." Sister Wang turned into a passionate matchmaker in the blink of an eye. "Tell me, what good girls are there around here?" "Oh yes, my family is a family of sword-bearers. My ancestors have produced more than a dozen sword-bearers. So there is an ancestral teaching in my family that I have to find a family of sword-bearers. Aunties, do you know? Is there a family of sword-bearers that has been living here?" Guhan asked with a smile. At first glance, Guhan's request for a blind date sounded a bit unreasonable, full of discrimination and a feeling of matching. But in fact, most of the family of sword-bearers had such a request. Although there was no scientific conclusion, according to the observation of sword-bearers over the years, the marriage between sword-bearers could indeed increase the probability of producing a sword-bearer in the future. In order to ensure that their own family could continue to have a sword-bearer, the family of sword-bearers would all marry other sword-bearer families. Once a young man or woman in a family expressed dissatisfaction with this tradition and did not abide by it, it could be interpreted as a love story of Liang Shanbua and Zhu Yingtai in this era. The rules in Yanjing City and Yuzhang City were the same. When someone in the family became a sword-bearer, he could bring the whole family to live in the core area. However, if the family didn't have a new sword-bearer within 3 generations, then the family would be banished to the second ring. Therefore, if one wanted to live in the core area, they would have to have a new sword-bearer every 3 generations. Gohan set up such an identity for himself so that he could find out from the mouths of these aunties which families had been living in this building. These families must be the most likely to have the loan receipt. Chapter 746. With the enthusiastic help of these two aunties, Gohan successfully obtained a lot of information. For example, there weren't many swordsman families that had been passed down for more than 10 generations, only 2 at most. One of them was said to have already declined, and once the current family head died, the family would immediately move out of the core area. The other family was bustling, and 2 brothers had become swordsmen at the same time. They were famous in the entire street, and everyone wanted to marry their daughters into them. In summary, the 2 aunties advised Gohan not to marry the daughter of the second family. With the 2 swordsman brothers, he would definitely be able to live a good life. On the surface, Gohan nodded with a smile, but in reality, he excluded the 2 swordsman brothers. This was because the 2 swordsman brothers were extremely greedy and lustful, and it was said that they had already occupied more than 10 beautiful girls, taking all of them as their concubines. However, the 2 swordsman brothers had gone through legal procedures, and the concubines were also willing to be with the 2 brothers, so Gohan couldn't be bothered to care about these things. However, with the 2 brothers' greedy and lustful personalities, it was impossible for them to protect the treasure that I Ching had left for him. Not to mention the preciousness of the promissory note, even the jade ring that I Ching had left behind was extremely rare. With such a precious item in the hands of the 2 brothers, Gohan didn't believe that the 2 brothers would be able to resist the temptation, and it was even more impossible for them to send him the precious jade ring. Therefore, after bidding farewell to the 2 unwilling aunties, Gohan directly went to the door of the swordsman family that was said to be moving out of the core area. Knock, knock. Gohan knocked 3 times, but no one answered. However, the door opened directly, and it turned out that the door had not been closed at all. As he walked into the room, a pungent smell assaulted his nostrils. This was a very strange smell, like bitter gourd, and there was even a hint of sourness in it. Looking towards the source of the smell, he discovered that there was a small stove burning in the living room, and there was a teapot on top of the stove. However, this utensil was different from the teapot. The body of the teapot was much higher and wider than the teapot. It was a utensil that Gohan had never seen before. Interesting. Gohan quietly walked forward, wanting to take a closer look at the utensil, but he suddenly heard a tender voice behind him. "Don't touch my grandfather's medicine." "Who are you?" Gohan turned his head and saw a 7 or 8-year-old child with pigtails looking at him with a pair of big watery eyes. "You're saying that this pot is boiling medicine?" Gohan sniffed the bitter smell in the air again. "How come I've never heard of such medicine?" Grandpa said it's called Chinese medicine. It's a treasure that has been passed down from ancient times to the present. You people cut your own bodies every day. Sooner or later, you won't even know how you died. The child unceremoniously ridiculed Gohan, then ran over and pushed Gohan away from the medicine stove. "You baddies, get out of here! My grandfather isn't dead yet, and this is still my home." It turned out that this child had thought of Gohan as a government worker who had chased them out of the core region. It was no wonder that his attitude towards Gohan was so disgusted and unfriendly. However, Gohan had not expected that this unremarkable teapot would actually contain Chinese medicine. This was a treasure that had been lost for 1,000 years. Gohan had long heard of the power of Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine could cure many diseases that even the current medical technology, which was like black technology, could not. Could even bring the dead back to life. It was a legendary and incomparably powerful medical system. Unfortunately, during the apocalypse, most Chinese medicine had died in that catastrophe. The remaining bit of Chinese medicine had also been lost during the cultural apocalypse. Although later generations had the intention to restore Chinese medicine through some clues, unfortunately, they had never been able to find the method. Thus, Chinese medicine had become a mythical existence, only heard of in name but not in reality. This had become one of the biggest problems since ancient times. A book related to Chinese medicine could easily sell for tens of millions of yuan, which showed how rare and precious Chinese medicine was. Unexpectedly, Gohan could see the legendary Chinese medicine in this small room. This made Gohan even more convinced that the old man in this room was definitely not simple. It was very likely that he was the person he was looking for. "Little boy, you've misunderstood. I'm not here to chase you away. I'm here to look for something," Gohan replied honestly. "Look for something? Don't lie to me just because I'm a child. My house is already bare, how could there be anything for you to look for?" The child shouted, then immediately realized that something was wrong. "What nonsense are you talking about? This is my house. Why are you looking for something in my house?" "Little boy." Gohan suddenly raised his voice, making it loud enough for the people in the room to hear clearly. "I received a letter. It was the owner of the letter who told me that there was something I wanted here." "What are you talking about? Which bastard wrote to you to look for something in our house? We don't have what you want at all. You'd better get out of here now." The child put his hands on Gohan's waist, trying hard to push Gohan away from his house. Unfortunately, Gohan's body technique had already surpassed the level of being one with the horse. This child's strength could not push him away at all. "Little Hai. That's our family's distinguished guest. Cough cough. Don't be rude. Cough cough. Hurry up and invite the distinguished guest in." An old voice came from the room and said to Little Hai. The child could only helplessly stick out his tongue, tilted his head and pointed to the direction of the door to Gohan's room. "Since Grandpa called you and said that you're a distinguished guest, then go in." Gohan pushed open the door of Grandpa's room. An even more strange smell rushed into Gohan's nose. Unlike the smell of Chinese medicine that Gohan could not smell before, this smell had been smelled by Gohan many times. This was the smell of death. Once this smell appeared on a person's body, it meant that this person was not far from death. This was not the smell of injury and death, but the smell of a person's lifespan coming to an end. All the vitality in the body had been completely cut off. This old man was already dead. Unlike the four bare walls in the living room, the old man's room was filled with all kinds of things. On the wall was a big picture of the yin-yang fish of Tai Chi, and around the yin-yang fish was placed the 8 trigrams. In the corner of the room, there was a statue of a deity respectfully worshipped. In front of the statue of the deity was an incense burner with 3 sticks of sandalwood. Around the incense burner were all kinds of offerings, and there was even a piece of expensive natural pork. This person's house was bare to this extent, but he still used such rich offerings to worship a statue of the deity. From this, it could be seen how devout this old man's faith was. Gohan carefully looked at the statue of the deity, and found it unexpectedly familiar. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before. His gaze moved away from the statue of the deity, and on the other side of the room, there was a huge bookcase. On the bookcase, there were all kinds of books neatly arranged. These books were all in an ancient thread-bound style, a style that only existed in the Middle Ages. Although there were many books like this now, from the mottled marks on the bookcase, it was very likely that these books were all authentic, left behind from the era before the Great Destruction. This was an incredible amount of wealth. If these books were all authentic, then any one of them could easily be sold for hundreds of thousands or even millions at an auction. Gohan couldn't help but walk closer, wanting to see if these books were real or fake. But before Gohan could take a few steps forward, Little Hai blocked in front of Gohan, shaking his head and saying, "I won't let you look at my family's things. You bad person must have been tempted to steal my family's books and sell them. I definitely won't let you touch my family's things." "Little Hai, how dare you?" His grandfather, who was lying on the sickbed, suddenly roared, scaring Little Hai into kneeling on the ground. Little Hai walked to his grandfather's bedside and cried, "Grandpa, please don't be angry. It's all Little Hai's fault. Please don't be angry, please don't be angry." This is a good child. He knows that every time his grandfather gets angry, he is one step closer to the king of hell. Gohan looked at the child approvingly, then once again approached the bookcase. Gohan found that these books were very well organized. Although there were no titles written on the middle of the books, there was a small slip of paper at the bottom of each book, on which was written the name of the book. Gohan glanced at it and saw the labels: Tao Te Ching, Nan Hua True Scripture, Profound Penetration True Scripture, Rushing Void True Scripture, Yellow Quartz Scripture, Jade Emperor Scripture, Nine Cauldrons Divine Pill Scripture, All True Saints Divine Embryo Scripture, Heavenly Pure Golden Liquid Divine Pill Scripture, Yellow Emperor's Inner Scripture, and so on. Are these all authentic? Even with Gohan's temperament, when he saw the names of these books, he was so excited that he couldn't control himself. These books were extremely precious treasures to humans. Since the great cultural collapse, these books could no longer be found. It was impossible for future generations to know even a word in them. It had been 800 years, these books had disappeared for 800 years. If people knew that these Taoist classics still existed in the world in the form of ancient books, perhaps even Jiandi couldn't help but take these Taoist classics into his own collection. Gohan roughly glanced at it again and found that there were more than 300 different labels here. If all the Taoist classics marked by these labels were preserved here, then almost 90% of the Taoist classics were here. Humans could almost declare that one of the most mysterious cultures in China since ancient times, Taoism, could be completely resurrected. Such precious things. Why did you hide them here? If you had given them to humans earlier, then we humans would have been able to understand the thoughts of our ancestors, and even find a way to eliminate Yuan Ko. Seeing this, Gohan couldn't help but ask the old man lying on the bed with some excitement. The heavenly Tao is heartless, and the people have no self. The calamity of humanity has not ended, and it is not time for these things to come into being, cough cough. The old man said with a weak voice, "But today, my Wudong lineage can finally be free." Chapter 747. This old man actually said that he was a descendant of Wudong. When Gohan heard these words, he instantly thought of the unfinished story of the Wudong Pinnacle Dungeon. The survivors of Wudong Mountain were all rescued by the immortal sword-wielder back to Yanjing City. Could it be that this old man was a descendant of those survivors? If that was the case, then these vast and boundless Taoist scriptures could be explained. These books should be treasures brought down from Wudong Mountain by the descendants of Wudong, and had always been in the hands of the descendants of Wudong. Grandpa, what nonsense are you talking about? What relationship do we have with Wudong Mountain? How are we descendants of Wudong? Is your illness worsening again? The little brat said hurriedly, trying to cover up the matter of the descendants of Wudong. Little Hai, there is nothing to hide in front of this lord. We have to tell the truth to make up for the mistake left by our ancestors. The old man coughed violently a few more times, scaring Little Hai into kneeling beside the old man, repeatedly saying yes. Lord, this old man has waited for more than 60 years, and finally, you have arrived. The sins of our Wu-Tang lineage for generations can finally be put to an end on this day. Although the old man's face was full of illness, he could not suppress the smile on his face. Clearly, the happiness in his heart had surpassed the pain in his body. What is going on? Are you really the descendants of Wudong Mountain? Gohan asked. So you already know about Wudong Mountain. That old man will not hide it from you. This old man is the 39th generation descendant of Wudong Zhenwu, the 58th generation leader of Wudong. When the old man spoke of the identity of the current leader of Wudong, his expression became very strange. It was unclear whether it was an expression of happiness or regret. To think that Wudong sect still exists in this world. He nodded. What about the others? I remember that there were hundreds of Wudong sect members who escaped back to Yanjing City. What about the others? Where did their descendants go? Descendants. The old man's expression became even more pained. There are no descendants. The entire Wudong sect is only left with the two of us. Otherwise, the position of Wudong sect leader would not have been handed to an old man like me, who has no talent at all. What is going on? Could it be that the descendants of Wudong encountered many more disasters later on? How could there be only the two of you left? Gohan asked, puzzled. My lord is wise. We have indeed suffered a calamity. However, this tribulation does not come from outsiders, but from our own hearts. After saying this, the old man fell silent for a long time. The stiff aura on his face became even more intense. Gohan estimated that in less than 10 minutes, this old man would pass away. What calamity will come from your heart? Gohan continued to ask. It's greed. The old man stretched out his hand and ordered Little C, go get Grandpa's brocade box. Grandpa? Which box are you talking about? The child even winked at his grandfather as he spoke, but it did not escape Gohan's eyes. Bastard! Apart from the one and only brocade box that Grandpa has, how could he have a second brocade box? The old man coughed violently a few more times. Stinking brat, if you don't want to anger your grandfather to death, then give me that brocade box. Yes. Only then did the child helplessly get up and walk to the side of the bookshelf. He gently pressed a certain spot, and the entire bookshelf began to move to the sides, revealing a small cabinet in the middle of the bookshelf. From the cabinet, he suddenly took out a brocade box. Grandpa, it's here. Little C placed the brocade box in front of his grandfather. The old man struggled to stretch out his bony, withered hand from under the blanket and slowly opened the brocade box. From inside, he took out a pure white letter and handed it to Gohan. Gohan took the letter and saw that at the center of the top of the letter were the words, I owe you. Today, I borrowed 3-6 revolutions immortal pills from the Wudong sect. In the future, I will definitely repay you tenfold. Whether it is 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. If there is a descendant who holds a IOU and asks for repayment from me or my descendants must do their best to repay it. Not a single word of refusal is allowed. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon. April 15, 2286. After reading the words on the IOU, Gohan's heart was filled with excitement. Although there were less than 100 words on the IOU, it revealed a lot of shocking information. First, the IOU was written by Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon was the 7th head of the Lun Yen family, and also the first female head of the Lun Yen family. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's talent was extremely high. Before the age of 35, she had already become a peak immortal sword wielder. She was only one step away from becoming an emperor sword wielder. It was said that at the time, all the sword wielder naturally believed that Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon would ascend to the throne and become an emperor. However, until the day she died, she was still an immortal sword wielder. Later on, it was said that Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's talent was sufficient, and she even had a sword-spirit connection with the Emperor's Sword of Ether. Being able to form a sword-spirit connection with the Emperor's Sword meant that she had a 100% chance of successfully synchronizing with the Emperor's Sword of Ether. However, in the end, she had never touched the Emperor's Sword of Ether until the drunken monk Jiandi succeeded in synchronizing with the Emperor's Sword of Ether. Since then, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's hopes of becoming Jiandi had completely disappeared. Although there were no written records of this, almost all of the later generations could say with certainty that Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon had a crush on the drunken monk Jiandi her entire life. In order for the drunken monk Jiandi to ascend to the throne, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon had even given up on her own hope of becoming emperor and voluntarily gave the Emperor's Sword of Ether to the drunken monk Jiandi. Unfortunately, fleeting year of Bloody Moon's infatuation did not come to fruition. In the end, the drunken monk Jiendi did not end up with fleeting year of Bloody Moon. Instead, he became a monk and became a bald monk. He was the only Jiendi among all the Jiendi to become a monk. After that, fleeting year of Bloody Moon locked herself up in the fleeting family and never came out again. Later on, she married some man and had children with him. Perhaps she didn't marry at all and only had children. 2 years after she gave birth to the heir of the fleeting family, fleeting year of Bloody Moon passed away. 2 years later, the drunken monk Jiendi ascended as well. No one in the later generations knew what had happened between them. Even if they knew, they did not dare to say it out loud. No one dared to cause trouble for the fleeting family. It was such a good love story that no one dared to write a book or a script about it. It was a waste of a top-tier IP. From the contents of the note, fleeting year of Bloody Moon had borrowed 3 6 revolutions elixirs from the descendants of the Wudong clan and promised that her descendants would pay back 10 times the amount. As long as the descendants of the Wudong clan came to her with this note, her descendants would have to pay back the debt immediately. They could not afford to waste even a single second. Here was the question. How many 6 revolutions elixirs did the descendants of the Wudong clan have? I Ching had obtained 1 from the descendants of the Wudong clan and left it to Guhan. Fleeting year of Bloody Moon had borrowed 3 more from the descendants of the Wudong clan. Who knew how many 6 revolutions elixirs the descendants of the Wudong clan had left? However, on second thought, since I Ching could take away a 6 revolutions elixir from the descendants of the Wudong clan, it was clear that I Ching had a very good relationship with the descendants of the Wudong clan. It was not strange that I Ching would entrust his affairs to the descendants of the Wudong clan. Right now, Guhan was not interested in the 6 revolutions elixir. What he really cared about was the problem of the note. With the value of 3 6 revolutions elixirs and the promise of paying back 10 times the amount, let alone 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood, the fleeting family would have made a profit even if they asked for 30,000 cubic centimeters. Moreover, Guhan believed that with the foundation of the fleeting family, 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood should not be a problem. The fleeting family had given birth to a total of 4 Jiendi, and every generation of Jiendi had a good relationship with the fleeting family. If the fleeting family left a few thousand cc of sovereign blood for each of their own Jiendi, and then each of the other Jiendi gave 500 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood to the fleeting family, it would not be a problem for the fleeting family to accumulate tens of thousands of cc of sovereign blood. Therefore, Guhan no longer had any doubts that this note would be able to obtain 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood. However, at the same time, new doubts surfaced in Guhan's mind. The borrower of this note was clearly from the Wudong clan. It belonged to the Wudong clan. Originally, Guhan had thought that the promissory note had been loaned out by the heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor, and that the Wu-Tang lineage was only temporarily keeping it for the Sword Emperor. He had never expected that the promissory note actually belonged to the Wu-Tang lineage. What right did the Wu-Tang lineage have to give such a precious promissory note to Guhan? If Guhan was the successor of the Wudong clan, he definitely would not care about the teachings of his ancestors and directly give this note to the fleeting family in exchange for enough resources for his growth. Only an idiot would give it to someone unrelated. For example, the child who was glaring at Guhan right now. If it was not for his grandfather stopping him, this child would have snatched the note back from Guhan's hands. Why? This IOU clearly belongs to you, doesn't it? Why are you willing to give it to me? Guhan asked the old man. He felt that if he did not ask this now, he would never have the time to ask this question again. Sir, you're wrong. This is no longer something that belongs to the Wudong clan. This belongs to you in the first place. The old man coughed up a mouthful of blood. Back then, the Wudong clan committed a sin that cannot be redeemed even with 10,000 death. I only hope that this note can allow the Wudong clan to redeem 1/10 of our sins. It will be worth it. What sins did you commit? Such a precious note can only redeem 1/10 of our sins. Gu Han was very curious as to what crime the Wu-Tang lineage had committed in the past to actually cause them to be in such a miserable state. Back then, the old man mumbled for a long time, but he could not catch his breath. In the end, his body went limp and he fell back onto the bed, dead. Grandfather! Little C let out a sorrowful cry and threw herself onto her grandfather's body, letting out a series of tragic cries. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.